Hello everybody, I'm Phil Liggett and I'll be joined in commentary on the Tour of Flanders with Paul Sherwin, and this is another World Cycling Productions video and I hope you enjoy it. And as always, this is the major event in Belgium in any of its sporting year. It'll attract over 250,000 spectators and it is without doubt their biggest day of the year. And we're watching the riders here earlier on today as they started the climb. There's 76 kilometres still to run. There is a breakaway, it's quite a large breakaway. 1 minute and 42 seconds ahead. It contains riders such as Tyler Farrer of the Garmin Barracuda team. Massive crowd. The big talking point this year is the new route and the new finish in Oudenaarde. And it's a case of whether you like it or not, but everybody does seem to have an opinion on it. And the riders will no doubt give their verdicts by the time they get through to the finishing line. Peloton tackling the Quaremont here at the moment as they all battle for position. The crowd rather orderly because unlike most years there's barriers, there's a rider off with trouble, a drop chain. This is going to happen all the time today. This is now coming down to the crucial section of the race. And just struggling there, that rider there's Kurt Hooverlink, who's just had a bit of a problem. It looks as though he may have to require a new bike there. As they come past the famous little coffee shop, it was on the right as we came up the hill, it's on the left now. But I bet you wouldn't buy a coffee in there today. It's a packed house as the riders go out on the course. A lot of VIP tents on the climb this year. And already riders at the back are seeing that their day is done. There's Hooverlink looking rather disgusted with his situation at the moment because he's going to have a little bit of a wait before the team cars can come through this narrow road and give him what appears to be another bike. The peloton at 1:42 still contains all of the pre-race favourites, not least Fabian Cancellara and Tom Bonen are in this group. Another rider there just slips by, also trying to fix his bike for himself as the cobblestones take their toll. There are things fall off your bike you never knew you had on them on these cobblestones in Belgium. But the saving grace today, I think, is the fact that the sun is out and it's quite a pleasant day. Quite a strong wind blowing as well. That breakaway now that we've got to the business end of the course after the start this morning, is beginning to come down quite rapidly here. When you ride the Tour of Flanders, the strong men at this stage of the race on these narrow cobbled climbs have to ride near the front. They have to hold their position, and to get that position, racing is fierce onto the approach of the climbs. 7th climb of the day, Astana riders here also in the spot of bother at the back. These two Astana riders who have now given up. The back rider here is Dmitry Fofanov, who has dropped back, and just in front of him Dmitry Murayev, two Kazakhstan riders. As we go to the front of the bunch, a lot of work being done now by the Aussie Matthew Heyman, former Commonwealth Games road race champion, sitting there at the front. He's in the black and looking as though he's trying to stir up a little bit of a split in the race here now as they get onto better roads for the moment. They're working for Juan Antonio Fletcher, the Spanish man who makes an annual visit to all of the classics and usually comes away with some top results. Tom Bonen in the light blue jersey, the new Amiga Quick-Step colours for the year, dead centre of our picture. And the big danger today, Tom Bonen, as he prepares for the Paris-Roubaix, which is just a week away. And don't forget too, that's another World Cycling Productions DVD coming your way. 1:35 the gap. You see how these riders now are racing to hold their positions at the front. They're riding at around about 27, 28 miles an hour, 43, 44 kilometers an hour, to try and stop anybody moving up for the back. But what they've done at the moment on this climb is completely stretch the peloton. This is actually a fair-sized group at the front, but it's by no means all of the peloton here just at the moment. Once they sense a slowing at the front, another wave of riders go up there. 74 kilometers to go, inside 45 miles to the finish. And somebody's got a problem down there, and that, I think, was in the leading group. Slip of the gears perhaps, getting back down to business. As soon as our cameras get up there, it's Lloyd Mondry from AG2R, a team that hasn't had a win this year yet. Well, this is the time to get it. And he was in fact at the back of that peloton, and he's a lot of ground to make up now. He's got a small group just in front. We go up towards the leaders in the race now. I just saw Tyler Farrar there. As we continue on the climbs, another little cobble climb here, minute 32 the gap. They're still losing ground slowly. Tyler Farrar is the rider in blue on the left of our picture. An unusual move this, because Farrar is a noted sprint finisher, but he's not clashing with the likes of Tom Bone and Fabian Cancellara for the finish. He decided to make a race of this and go out on the attack early. It was a premeditated plan. His team quite happy he's done this. It's a tough way to win a race, but maybe if he's got the strength left when the riders come up from the back, he'll have some chance of going forward with the leaders as they go down towards the finish in Oudenaarde. British flag and the Swiss flags flying. The Swiss, of course, is for Fabian Cancellara, the British flag for the British Sky team. Although their leader is Edvald Boysenhagen, the Norwegian youngster, that man they're protecting is undoubtedly Juan Antonio Fletcher today. Great atmosphere here in Belgium. I think that the new route will favour will gather the public opinion in their favour, because they can see the rise a lot of times now before they go down and around to the finish in Oudenaarde. Now Omega Pharma Quickstep trying to keep Tom Bonen in the thick of the action there at the front. The pressure stays on. Bonen is right up there as well. Flag of Flanders, that's the yellow flag, and also the British flag of St. George flying. And that's probably for Hunt of the Sky team. Well, that gap is coming down quite quick now. It's now down to 1 minute and 10 seconds and hovering. It's going to be an interesting move. They won't want to bring this breakaway back too quickly yet. There's still too many challenges to come around the hills of Flanders. 72 kilometers to go. It's a long way. They know if they do bring it back too quickly, then there will be a problem, because the counter-attacks will start straight away. I think of all of the one-day classics the riders of note want to win, this is probably the one, the Tour of Flanders. It's the one that the great Irishman Sean Kelly never did win, although he tried as he might. He won virtually all of the rest. This one, he had a couple of second places, but never got to carry this one off. A little bit of slowing down, which you can afford to do on the narrowness at the top of the climb, because you've got your position at the front and you can lock it off and stop anybody getting by you. Over the top, a minute the gap, and still coming down. A little bit of a different sight at the back of this peloton, because they're having to go at the speed of the leaders, and there's also trouble there for a couple of the Saxo Bank riders as well. Just sitting on the floor there is Jonas Jurgensen of Denmark, opting now to push his bike up the climb, probably the best option. In the old days, when there were no barriers and the crowd still on the roadside, then you didn't even have to get off your bike. They would pick you up bodily and push you and your bike back into the action. A bit more difficult now, the road is barriered. Health and safety reign supreme as the riders now go out into the country again. The springtime still looking a little bit denuded of all of the leaves of spring, that's for sure. Been a wet approach to the spring this year. This is still the breakaway, working pretty hard, but they know now, they must know now, that their long assault on the roads of Flanders is coming to naught here. We're inside a minute to the advanced portion of the peloton. There's Tyler Farrar. Here's a full list of the names in this breakaway for you. Anders Lund, Geert Dox, Pablo Lestras. These are the riders now who are looking to hold off the peloton, and the gap is hovering just inside 58 seconds. Well, they've been the early runners of the day, and they've had the time gap, but now it looks to me as though it is all going to come back pretty soon. Daniel Sean trying to get up there. He is in between. And before we go to the action, with about 45 miles left to ride, some of our favourites have had their own problems today. This is Sepp van Mark here. He had a puncture. He was lucky to have a teammate close by in what is turning out to be a very hotly contested race. He got back into the race and he got back up into the peloton as well. But our big favourite, Fabian Cancellara, as we approached the Molenberg at around about 121 kilometres from the finish, he was stopped at the bottom. Once he got over the top, he was anxiously looking for a team car, finally got off and adjusted the back brake on his rear wheel himself. And then Peter Sagan, the youngster here, he came back to his team car at about 110 kilometres to go. He had a problem with his front brake, and in fact 10 kilometres later Peter Sagan was seen off his bike and taking a new bike. They've all rejoined up in the lead group, but it has been a terrific fight to get back into the action. And now, as we go to the live pictures here, take a look at this, because we are seeing riders now in all sorts of trouble. The Sky team car here has broken down. This has happened on the Paterberg, Paul. We've done one climb of the old Quaremont. We have a breakaway. We had a breakaway of 15 riders throughout much of the day. The gap is down to just over a minute, and there are about 13 riders left in the group. But I'll tell you, we are watching a classic Tour of Flanders, Paul. They are charging across the heart of Flanders, and they're giving no quarter.
They are giving no quarter at all. I tell you what, I think this is going to be a much more nervous finish to the Tour of Flanders than we've ever seen before. The climbs are so much more compact. All of the big climbs still to come. Yes, we've been over the old Quaremont once, Phil, but we've got 2 more times to go, and there are 8 more of these Flandrian climbs still left to go.
Well, the field at this peloton now, as you can see, is down to about 70 riders here. Cancellara took a while to get back because he split off in the bunch on narrow roads. This is the characteristic of this race, very narrow roads. Greg van Avermaet, the BMC rider on the American squad to our right, amongst one of the outsiders to possibly win today for Belgium. Cancellara is trying to fight his way back into the action up here. This is the traffic block on the Paterberg, and this is caused by cars. It's at a replay, in fact, Paul. That is the Sky car running up the back of the Landau credit car, I think, because the stop-go as riders are falling off all of the time and, in fact, walking on the climbs.
Well, they're all very nervous in the main field, Phil, but the team managers are also extremely nervous as well. They want to be in the order that they've been given the day before this race, because that's the best order that they can attain on a race like this. And it's extremely important on the narrow roads, because if your rider has a mechanical incident and you're in 15th or 16th position in the convoy of cars behind, it can mean anything up to a minute before you can actually get in there to help one of your riders.
Now, our camera's concentrating here. Remember, these are live pictures, concentrating at the head of the peloton. But I must tell you that Tyler Farrar, the American on Garmin Barracuda, is in the breakaway and has been all day. And Paul, you were telling me earlier, you spoke with Jonathan Waters. It's part of that plan?
Well, Jonathan Waters said the best plan that they could have would be to try and get Tyler Farrar into the early breakaway. He said if that breakaway group had been 4 or 5 riders a lot strong, that wouldn't have been a good situation for us. But with 15 men in a strong breakaway like that, he's very, very happy with the way the situation is unfolding.
So, the field concentrating here now, as we are looking here at the peloton, licking their lips perhaps. Well, I would expect that to be the case right now, because they've got control at the front. The big teams, they've blocked off, so nobody can make any progress from the back. One or 2 riders recovering. The peloton continually splitting here. Very difficult race to marshal this as well. As you can see, the press motorbikes and our own TV motorbikes, nowhere to go there in the peloton, having to slip to give us this shot at the rear. Desperate moments, because with these roads continually changing direction, left and right, the wind is also changing with them, and it calls for desperate moments here by the riders. The big teams, Team BMC particularly at the front, the Radio Shack Nissan Trek team, the team from Rabobank, all controlling the front, and Tom Bonen's squad, they're just tucked in second string, those light blue jerseys of the Amiga Farmer squad. Perfect position at the moment. The peloton has dropped back a little bit. It's back to 1:29 on that leading group, so it's a good move. It's making them think about it. At least they'll feel it's under control. 1.5 minutes and 67 kilometers to go to the finish. That's over 40 miles still to run. They're not going to worry too much about this gap, and of course we've still got the return up the old Quaremont again to come. Now, that's a typical Flanders piece of countryside. long exposed roads, and in the months of March and April very often they are cold roads, they are muddy roads, but today the ride's a little bit fortunate that apart from the narrowness and the cobblestones, racing conditions are pretty pleasant. Fabian Cancellara still being talked about as the man most likely to. He was third in the Tour of Flanders last year after winning it the previous year. Very disappointed with that third place last year. But having won the Strada Bianchi this year, which is a race on very bad roads in Italy last month, and then taking a stage at Tirreno Adriatico, he's going to feel pretty confident he's got the legs today. Here we go again, onto the Koppenberg. The flags of Flanders indicating the crosswinds that's hitting the riders. We're back with the leaders here as they continue to head up towards the top of the climb. Looking as though now they're getting a little bit ragged here, these riders in front, as the hills now come thick and fast deep in the belly of Flanders. The peloton are going to know that they're playing into the heart of this breakaway now all of the time. Tyler Farrar, second wheel on the left of our picture, looking as though he's riding them pretty well. It's coming up to the steep part. It doesn't appear that steep on television, but this is a real tough climb just here. And if you lose your rhythm, then you fall off. It's as simple as that. You hardly have time to flick your cleats and get your feet off those pedals. Crowd appreciating the effort here. Farrar trying to keep the strong men in sight, knowing that the respite over the top, he'll get back into the lead of this group. No real passengers here. They're all getting over it pretty well. Just passing through, making the effort there was David Boucher, number 92. He continues on. The crowd is big, but I think because of the nature of the circuits and because you can't pack everybody in onto this section of the climb, a lot of people have moved to other parts of the course this year. Peloton also now onto the climb itself, are just about to get onto the climb as they start the way up. Again, the strong men will out at the front, just holding the pace nice and steady, knowing that the leaders should crack one by one as we get into the final moments of this race. Just over 40 miles now left to go. Still no signs of individual heroics from the peloton as they continue to go. And they're starting to bring riders back from the breakaway now as the Netta app rider returns to the fold here. Right on the steep part of the climb. This is when the Tour of Flanders really hurts. 600 meters long, 11.5%.
And the riders are being proved exactly right. This is proving to be a terrific course, I have to say, Paul, but very much harder indeed. This is the main peloton now tackling the Koppenberg climb. The leaders are down to 11 men, and noticeably, Paul, Philippe Gilbert has got himself right to the front.
Well, a lot of riders from Team BMC Racing riding near the front end of the main field as well. George Hincapie looking very strong. Former winner of this race, Alessandro Ballan, the Italian rider on BMC Racing, also riding in the first 3 or 4 places. But here you get a chance just to see what sort of damage the famed Koppenberg can do. It is a beast of a climb, and if you're stuck at the back of the race here, you're going to have to chase for an awful long time to make contact once again.
Well, unlike the old Quaremont, this is the only time we climb the Koppenberg. You can see from the Flanders flags there, the flags of Flanders blowing strongly. This is one of the riders, I think it's Andreas Schillinger, who has been dropped from the lead group, and he's checking where the peloton are. And they're right there behind him now, fanning out across the road, dead centre, the champion of Belgium, Philippe Gilbert, being paced by the former champion of Belgium, also on Team BMC, Greg van Avermaet. They're just in the centre of the pack.
And in second position there, you can see Alessandro Ballan with the world bands around his sleeves, looking extremely strong. Fabian Cancellara just going out of shot there, looking very comfortable indeed at the front end of the main field. He doesn't even seem to have broken a sweat just yet.
Well, he has had a rough ride now. Tom Bonen over the last half hour has been seen to follow him. He's just gone underneath our camera at the moment, so he's not too far back. He hasn't climbed the Koppenberg, though, as strongly as Fabian Cancellara. And we've seen Bonen in previous Ronde van Flanders or Tour of Flanders attack on this very climb.
Yeah, I think all the riders, Phil, this year are a little bit scared about the change in the race route, because the race, once it comes down to Oudenaarde, there's 3 distinct different circuits, taking in the old Quaremont on each occasion. And in fact, talking to Jonathan Vortersfield just before the start of the race this morning, he said a lot of riders are strange of exactly what sort of tactics to adopt because they fear this running towards the finish. Oh, there's Cyril Chavanel just going off to the left-hand side, taking the risks to try and get himself to the front end of the main field. Riders will do almost anything to get themselves to the front end of the pack in these races.
Yes, a reaction from Green Edge. No takers there as he takes a look back at the field. And as we watch the men making their way away from the Koppenberg, I'm delighted to tell you that the women's Tour of Flanders is finished. In first place was Judith Arndt of Germany and the Australian Green Edge team. But Christian Armstrong of the USA is bang on course for a place at the Olympic Games in London as she crossed the line in second place. It was a breakaway as well. So as we're looking here at the leaders, just if we do get a little bit of picture breakup, it's out of our hands. These are coming live from Belgium. We are sat on the finishing line in Oudenaarde. A little bit chilly now. The wind is ducking in and out. The sun is ducking in and out behind the clouds. But a perfect day for racing. And that's Tyler Farrar here. He wanted a long breakaway today. Oh, he got one.
He certainly did. He's the rider just slipping into second position in the pale blue jersey there. Well, slipping out of view now, wearing number 151. But his Belgian teammate on the Garmin Barracuda squad, Sepp van Mark, is the unique team leader of this American squad today. He's already been a winner of a race this year early on in the season when he beat Tom Bonen to the line in the Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, which finished not too far away from here.
Now the crowd wait to see who is next up the hill here because the gap is closing down pretty quickly now. There's some of the names left in the breakaway. It was 15 riders. It's down to 11 at the last count. The rider behind is actually slipping off the back of the break. As setting the pace here is Baptiste Plankert. Now, a lot of people are speculating, is Baptiste Plankert a member of the famous Plankert family who are from Belgium? And in fact, although he is a Belgian, Paul reliably informs me he's no relation.
No relation at all. It's a well-known name here in Belgium because of the great famed dynasty almost of the Plankart brothers, Walter, Eddie and Willie, whose son Joe went on to race, and they were exceptionally good bike riders. But of course Baptiste is no relative at all. The main field now, Phil, are starting to get extremely nervous because they realise now this is crunch time. This is the part of the race when they start to get into a repetitive ascent of all these Flandrian climbs. And around here they call them the Mountains of Flanders. And for these bike riders in this race of 160 miles, they are starting to get rather tough.
So 16 climbs in all today as we switch back to the team car just before Tyler Farrar grabbed his little bag there, which has got his food for the rest of the day in it. This is the last feeding station, 63 kilometers out from the finish. The rider at the back there pulling on his bag was Manuel Belletti in the breakaway. There's Farrar, far left of our picture in the blue. I have to say, he's tamed these hills today. He's never looked under pressure on the cobble climbs at all. He rode up the old Quaremont first time, looking extremely comfortable.
Well, that was Farrar there, just sitting up in the pale blue jersey. He hasn't had a win so far to his credit this season, Phil, but he did finish second overall in the early season Tour of Qatar.
Philippe Gilbert, nearest camera, in the black, yellow and red jersey of the champion of Belgium. He hasn't shown any form. He's had all sorts of problems this year. He's had wisdom teeth problems as well. He seems to be recovering, but today the pressure's on him, and this is a typical scene. On every corner we get somebody taking the chance to change a wheel or fall off, and they've spotted it here. All the teammates waiting for the stricken rider. It must be the team leader.
Well, this is what happens, you see, Phil. This is why on these narrow roads of the Flanders, this is a pre-assigned plan.
Kevin Hulsman's, I think.
Yeah, if somebody has a problem, one of the riders will swap a wheel with the rider who's had a mechanical problem, allowing the team leader to get back into the race a lot quicker.
In fact, it's Oscar Gatto, the rider underneath our camera right now, who had the problem. Now, he is their sprinter, and they've decided he is the man and worth the service.
Well, you can understand now why they've done that. You see how a lot of riders have been dropped behind because of that climb of the Koppenberg, and in fact on some of these cobble climbs the team cars are not allowed to go over. They go through a deviation, so over the top of the climb, if you have an incident, you've got to repair it yourself up until the moment when your team car can get back in behind the race.
Maria Borrestraat. This is a little section of cobblestones here with no climbs. It's number 7 of 8 on the day. It's taking us through 194 kilometers covered, which is just under 120 miles. Already under the wheels in perfect racing conditions. We can tell you there's huge crowds on the actual climb of the old Quaremont. Row after row of marquees and tents of people enjoying themselves. That's one of the big draws now, that this race is going past that point 3 times before it finally finishes in Oudenaarde.
Well, this is turning rather interesting, because the gap between the leading group of riders who we're following here had come down to just around about the 1 minute margin over the peloton, but now it's starting to stretch out again. In fact, it's stretched out up to the 2 minute mark almost, and that's an indication that the big guns in the main peloton are doing exactly what Jonathan Vaughters expected this morning. They're starting to watch each other because they're a little bit concerned riding this race a little bit in the unknown because of the change of race route. It's made it difficult to know just exactly where to make the efforts of riders who've raced this race 4, 5, 6 times before over the same. So there's a massive crash here at the back.
Yes, and this is nasty.
And that's Cancellara in the middle of the road.
Down there. Well, this has been a terrible race for poor Fabian Cancellara. He has had mechanical troubles throughout the day, hard chases to rejoin, and now it looks as though he has fallen. Now, as I say, these pictures are live. We may get a flashback in a moment, but for the moment it looks as though he's possibly broken a collarbone here, Paul.
I have no idea what has happened here, Phil, but you can see two teammates up alongside him there from the Radio Shack Nissan Trek team. Cancellara is on the ground at the moment. He went down very hard indeed. That grey car is the car of the race doctor, so the race doctor will be up alongside him, but his teammates there are looking extremely concerned.
Meanwhile, further up the road, the peloton have gone through the feeding station. No, this is actually, it's caused in the feeding station. Right at the back of the peloton it's been caused. The most dangerous part of the course is when riders snatch these musettes, and they've caught out one of the best bike riders in the world, Fabian Cancellara. And by the way they're holding him here, I suspect a broken collarbone.
Well, the doctor there in the white jacket is all over Fabian Cancellara. He is making sure that he's okay. He'll make sure he is looked after. If there is any requirement, he will be evacuated immediately to the hospital. And there are a number of very good hospitals close by the race route here this afternoon, but Cancellara is nodding his head there. I think that's an indication, Phil, that he will not be getting up to carry on with this bike race.
The rider on the left here is the New Zealand rider, Jess Sargent, number 165 there, looking down, this young new professional on the Radio Shack team. He'll be devastated to see his team captain lying there on the floor. Mark Irizar, number 164. The team's race is done here. They've all stopped behind with their captain, the most outstanding favourite for years to win the Tour of Flanders today. And he spent most of his day on the defensive, it has to be said, with bicycle problems, long chases to rejoin, and now a crash in the feed.
Well, back at the front end of the peloton, we're now on the Steenberg-Dries climb, a 5.3%, maximum gradient 7%. We're looking at around about 2 minutes, the difference between the leading group of riders and the main peloton, while back down the road, poor old Fabian Cancellara, the Swiss champion, is down on the road and out of this year's Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Yes, there's no doubt that they're calling now for the stretcher, I think, for Fabian Cancellara. It's most unfortunate to crash in the feeding station. It's, you know it, Paul, firsthand. It's such a dangerous part of the bike race.
It is a very dangerous part of the bike race because you've got a whole bunch of riders going through the feeding station, taking on board bottles and bags at the side of the road. And if somebody drops a bag or a bottle in front of you, it's very easy to hit that bottle, lose control of the machine, and go straight over the top of the handlebars in an uncontrolled fall. And very often, I've always said it, Phil, the most dangerous crashes in a professional bike races are the crashes at slow speed.
Well, poor Fabian there, as you can see, there's a little bit of blood around his ear at the moment, so it's a bit of a head injury for sure. And, you know, only moments earlier, he was actually being quoted on the social network as saying, this is the most beautiful race in the world. The crowd are very, very special. It's an honour to race on the route of the Tour of Flanders in front of such enthusiastic people. People such as we see today. He doesn't deserve that, Fabian Cancellara, but he's been on the back heel throughout the day of racing as we come into the last 60 kilometres of the race itself. We still have, after the Steenberg-Dries, we've got another 6 climbs still to come here, and preoccupied still by a breakaway, which is reduced from 15 down to 10.
Well, here we're just going over 2 sections of cobblestones pretty much pinned together. The Maria Boorstraat, 194 kilometres covered, almost 120 miles of racing, and then immediately onto the Donderij section of cobblestones, 127 miles covered. And very shortly after that, we'll have the very nasty little climb of the Kruisberg once again. And this is Gert Steegmans on the front for Omega Pharma Lotto, for Omega Pharma Quickstep, I have to say. A lot of these teams are amalgamating and changing their form during the winter transfer season this year. But looking at that long length of the main field, that would be an indicator, especially with these pale blue jerseyed riders on the front, that Tom Bonen, the other pre-race favourite, Phil, is not having a bad ride.
Well, Boden's kept himself out of trouble, and also, I have to say, largely out of sight today, and he's just made sure he's been in the right place when it matters. Always coming near the front when they start to lift the speed as they turn on to these narrow cobble climbs. The rider on the front that we just seen there, he was an ex-teammate, in fact, of, or is an ex-teammate of Tom Boden. This is Matty Heyman, I think, who's having a tremendous ride for the Sky team, because he started to try and split them up again. Earlier, he did get a break of 6 away, but they came back together. Now he's trying again. Popping
across the gap in 4th position of those riders, well, up into 3rd position there with the lime green shoes. That, in fact, is George Hincapie, who, if he finishes this year's Ronde van Vlaanderen, or the Tour of Flanders, will set a new participation in the number of finishes in this great classic, going ahead, of course, of the very, very famous Belgian rider, Brik Schotter.
Well, what an honour too, and George, an American, riding on the hallowed Belgian soil here, and they'll take the record away from the great Belgian, Brik Schotter.
Well, we're just looking now at 60 kilometres to go. The 60 kilometres to go is 42.
So as we look at the peloton here, little flag up there warning the race, but the pressure is on by a Europe car at the moment as they continue to try. In fact, that breakaway has slipped away under the melee at 1:48, and the reason being poor Fabian Cancellara is down on the road in the feed, and Cancellara is in all sorts of trouble here. Almost certainly now his race is over as we head towards the finish.
And just looking the way the field is regrouping at the front now after that crash to Fabian Cancellara, that's a real big blow for Radio Shack as well, because his legs were good. 3rd last year, the winner of the Tour of Flanders the year before, and it looks indeed as though Cancellara is quite seriously injured there. He's on his way to hospital as far as we know at the moment. Minute 43, so the distraction of the crash looks as though it's left this little breakaway to consolidate just a little bit at the moment. We're inside 60 kilometres from the finish now. They continue to set a good pace here. Flag of Brittany on the left of the picture there. A little bit off course today, but enjoying the scenes. This is the cobblestones of Donderai. And just sat on the back here now is the movie star rider, Pablo Lestras. A reliable, solid performer is Pablo, and the man we would have expected to see in the breakaway today. And no, it isn't Michael Delage at the back there. It is, in fact, one of the riders on the Liquigas squad in this breakaway. Well, the field here, looking, we're going through, they're just helpers, they're offering bottles. It's not the official feed, but on this course, and this year it's possible because the zigzag around Flanders is to get helpers out on course to keep these riders serviced if they want to drink. They've done well to hold this gap, but they haven't really run away with it, have they? That's the problem. A minute 42. They haven't lost anything of their advantage for quite some time now. It looked as though it was going to crumble a little bit earlier, but not now. They've consolidated here. They all seem to be working pretty well together. 58 kilometres left to go. And I think the peloton will be stunned a little bit by that accident to Cancellara. And these boys may know nothing about it. Come down at 1:41 just at the moment. And what's happened here now? Astana rider right in the middle of the field, and that is Jacopo Guinerini. Now he's a sprinter. They're saying it's Maxim Iglinski. Not like Guinerini, but if they're saying it, let's go with it. Iglinski, another strong man, who is trying now. Astana riding well here today. They've been a lot in the action, but they've had a lot of riders in trouble at the back as well. So as they continue now, again, look at that. That was Iglinski, just came to grief right in the middle of the peloton. Can you believe that? And nobody fell off. That's a professional cyclist for you. Minute 36 the gap as they continue now. All looking round for a little bit of help from the rear at the moment. And it's beginning to hurt as well.
And the gap here now is 1:35. That crash to Fabian Cancellara has allowed them to pull away a little bit, but they're organising the chase now, especially the French Europcar team, Paul, because it's come back to 1:35.
Yes, but the American squad, BMC Racing, have still got a lot of strong riders at the front end of that peloton. I just noticed their former world champion, Thor Hushovd, the Norwegian rider on that squad, moving to the front end of the pack. Maybe they think they can set something up for Philippe Gilbert here this afternoon, because although Philippe Gilbert is much better suited to the hilly classics like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which happens in a couple of weeks' time, he certainly, as a Belgian, Phil, has always expressed his interest in trying to win this bike race. He hasn't had a great start to the season this year, but certainly if he could come up with the goods on a day like this, he would like to do it.
This is Tom Wieler's, who was in the breakaway, being swept up, and that's the first chance we've got to see the new colours of the Argus Shimano team. They announced their change of sponsorship only yesterday, and so he's now back in the field here, the Dutchman. One by one, they are sweeping them up here. A lot of anxious faces now, because we've gone over the Steenberg-Dries. The next climb comes 210 kilometres from the finish, and that 210 kilometres into the race, rather 47 from the finish, and that's the Kreisberg.
Well, BMC Racing in the red and black jerseys are being very, very attentive, trying to pick up the pace, trying to pull back that leading group of riders. It's down to 1:24 their advantage, and they're all thinking about the next climb of the day, which will be looming up in front of them, and that will be the Kreisberg, followed very, very quickly by the Eau de Quaremont. And I feel certain, Phil, that somebody will try and use the Eau de Quaremont as a leapfrog to victory. In second position, in the blue, white and red jersey, the tricolor of France, is the French national champion, Sylvain Chavanel, who himself is in great form after a recent victory in the 3 days of La Panne.
Yes, so we're coming into the last 57 kilometres, which is 36 miles of racing left to go now. And they've still got the 2 ascents of the Old Quaremont as well. This peloton is really taking some pounding just now as riders try desperately to get off the front, bring this breakaway of 10 riders, and then concentrate themselves. This looks as though Tommy Voigtler is putting himself on. He's also been off the bike with a flat tyre today.
Well, the Tour of Flanders, Phil, at the end of the day, when you go down to the showers, the stories are stories. There are so many of them. Everybody usually has a little bit of bad luck during the Tour of Flanders, but you hope it's not going to be an accident which is too difficult to get over, like the one we've just seen happen to Fabian Cancellara, and everybody fights back into the race at some time or another. Sitting in second position there is Gert Steegmans, the teammate, of course, of Tom Boonen. A little bit further back, the rider from Garmin Barracuda in the pale blue helmet. He's Johan van Summeren, the winner previously of course, the great Paris-Roubaix Classic, and that was a bit of a shock to one or two of us 12 months ago.
It most certainly was, and I think there wasn't a dry eye in the house, because he's such a popular helper as a rider, never a winner normally, and then he had his big day on Paris-Roubaix, which let me take an immediate remind you of.
Paris-Roubaix is next week, and World Cycling Productions will of course be issuing another video on the Queen of the Classics, so don't forget, that's one not to miss.
There's been a lot of problems in that peloton, but they keep fighting back and pushing the pace at the front. And it's not the favourites who are appearing in our television cameras at the moment.
Well, not yet, but it certainly will be a little later on. The inimitable style there in the green jersey of Europcar, that is Thomas Voigtler. On 2 occasions in his career, he's been a wearer of the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. I have to say that last year was his best ever performance, finishing in 4th place overall. He was oh so close to getting onto the podium. He's a very aggressive bike rider. Now, if you've got a book which indicates you the tactics that you need to adopt in a professional bike race, throw that away, and that is the way that Thomas Voigtler races. He races with his gut. He races with instinct.
He does indeed. He's never had a top 10 finish in these Belgian classic races before, but he has had a 10th place finish in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but that's a hilly classic. That's due in a couple of weeks' time and more likely to suit his style of racing. But he is one of those riders, he often says that the riders in the peloton don't like me. And the reason they don't like him is because he annoys them with attacks like this.
Well, you see him there just playing with his ear. That's because all of these riders have got race radios in. They're getting all of the information possible fed up to them from their team managers in the race cars behind. Most of the team managers, Phil, don't actually drive the car in a race like this because it's live on television. The team managers will be in the passenger's seat, and of course they will be watching the same images that we're watching now.
He's just playing around with his little earpiece there, which means he can talk back to the team car. He's not going very far now. He would ideally like 1 or 2 riders to perhaps come forward and join in with him and see what they can do. The gap is coming down. 61 seconds. That was once the gap Lance Armstrong won the Tour de France back in 2003. But it's gone down to a minute now as the peloton string out that long line of riders on another tight turn.
Well, we're about 8 kilometers, 5 miles from the next big climb of the day. That's Kreuzberg, and then after that it will be the Eau de Quaremont.
But it looks as though little Tommy Voeckler is about to get caught here as the field sweep up behind him. So they're all together again in the peloton, and the gap is just inside a minute for the first time now. It was nearly 6. The field is lining up.
But it's always nice when Thomas Voeckler attacks the 32-year-old as his 33rd birthday in June this year, and he's riding pretty well as well for the team from Europcar. Reasonably new team on the block. Finished 4th in the Tour de France last year after wearing the yellow jersey yet again for 10 days, just like he did in 2004. They put him back in his place right on the front of the peloton now as he checks out. They're just seeing who's around. There's a sense of urgency in the race nonetheless. But gone from the front here, one or two of the more famous faces at the moment. Just assessing what might be as they start to get into the critical sections of the race as we're getting down towards 50 kilometers to go now. Kreuzberg is the next climb. And still a very big peloton for this stage of the race, and that breakaway has done well, but it does seem to be coming down now. It's inside a minute yet again. Everybody's recovered. This is the famous Flemish town of Ronse, where they have lots of circuit races here throughout the year. All the Belgian riders in the peloton will no doubt have raced here in the past. Very tight right-handed bend there as they come off that corner. A lot of head turning going on to see who's going and marking time, I must say. 52 seconds, still the gap. This is a very busy city here in Belgium normally when the roads aren't closed for the passage of the Tour of Flanders. A lot of changes direction on good roads. And again, Astana now are getting to grips once more with this race. The breakaway, we haven't seen too much of the breakaway at the moment, but that's down to our host television company from Belgium. They're in control of the cameras now, and it's still, as you look down, it's a long line of riders there. Voeckler just sort of looking at the riders saying, well, what are we doing, guys? Not a lot at the moment is what he's probably saying. 52 kilometers, 50 seconds is the gap. Yellow is the warning sign in Europe, and the danger is no doubt the traffic furniture on these streets, and the racing's been turned off here. I think Thomas Voeckler has had something to do with that. Everybody now deciding what the next move will be. There's the route across Ronse on the right of the picture as we're going from right to left. The peloton appear to be in the same straight as the breakaway as they're about to make a right turn at the top end there. Anderslund, Geert Dox, these are all the riders still surviving in this breakaway. Pablo Lestras. The big name for the Americans is the man on the right, the sprinter Tyler Farrar. Brave move by Tyler today to go in this breakaway so early on and just see what happens. And now again there's more action from the front of that peloton as the arrowhead is drawn out. Dangerous moments, 51 kilometers to go.
Well, this is the town of Ronse now at 51 kilometers or 32 miles from the finish here. There's still a number of teams all throwing the weight behind, attack after attack, but there's no formal working at the front.
No, there's no organised chase in the main peloton. It's a question of nervousness, I think, on everybody's shoulders. This is what it's like racing in Belgium. You have to be very alert, very attent, because when you go around any corner, there could be some rather dangerous traffic furniture. Those guys on the left-hand side, they're going to have to ride an awful long time to get themselves back into the peloton, because that's a very high curve to have to negotiate.
As they come up one side, they're losing place in the peloton here as they continue to chase. The gap is now down to 50 seconds. As that breakaway, which went away very early on today as we went out around the countryside. Here's Tom Bonen First time we've seen him for a while. Number 21, just in front of number 108 there, which is Luca Paolini, who's also a very good sprinter. If he gets down to it, he may have a problem with the last couple of times up the old Quaramotto.
Well, we're inside now, 31 miles to go to the finish, and there are still 6 climbs left here in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, as they call it here, the Tour of Flanders. And the next climb on the agenda in about 3 miles' time will be the Kruisberg. It's a fairly easy climb. It's the climb that comes after that, Phil, that everyone else will start to fear. And with 36 kilometres to go, or 24 miles of racing left, the older Quaramotto riders will ascend for the second time here this afternoon.
So the field here trying to organise a reaction to the group at 50 seconds. We've still no update on the condition of Fabian Cancellara, who crashed in the feeding station some 38 miles from the finishing line, except he has been taken to hospital with his injuries. The peloton is actually falling back here with no organised pursuit. 54 seconds now as we get on to the climb of the Kruisberg. And the Kruisberg is hill number 11, and Tyler Farrer there is the man in blue, sat in 3rd position. First time I've seen him actually grimace. He's looked very, very cool all day, Tyler Farrer.
Well, the American sprinter on the Garmin Barracuda team, Phil, has actually looked very comfortable on a lot of these climbs. It was suggested to him by the team management, look for the early breakaway here this morning. This is Thor Hushovd on the front now there in the jersey of BMC Racing, the black and red jersey, former world road racing champion. I think today he will be sacrificing his own chances for maybe Philippe Gilbert, the Belgian national champion, or why not Greg van Avermaet.
This looks like Hassan Basayev who's making a move here for Astana. And it looks like I thought he wanted to get away to have his lunch in peace, but he's put that in his back pocket now as he tries to open up a bit of a gap.
Well, this is a fairly long climb they're looking at here, but it's not a cobbled climb like some of the other climbs that the riders will face up to here this afternoon. It's a long, smooth surface climb at 2.5 kilometres long, and that's just around about 1.5 miles. But look at the chaos which is the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Over on the left-hand side there, you can see the Lion of Flanders and the main field for the first time, filling this very long straightaway, get a sight of what they've been chasing since the very early part of this race, the survivors of that early morning 15-man breakaway.
Well, we're now deep in the heart of Flanders here in Belgium. This is Lens, and this is an area which is famous for its post-race circuit races after the Tour de France in the month of July. Basayev tried to be the first to bridge the gap. As Paul has said, that breakaway, once 15 strong, has been ahead virtually all day today. In the first hour, they covered 30 miles. In the second hour, it's 26 miles, so they've got an average speed of 28 miles for an hour for the first 2 hours of racing.
Well, this is
Now,
Tom
this
Bonen.
is Bonen.
This is Bonen at the back of the group here. He's just getting a little bit of grease onto those that chain of his there. The mechanic wants to make everything right before we come to the final climbs of the day. He doesn't look like a man in difficulty. He's always been alongside one of his teammates, either Hed Stegermans or the other teammate who's an extremely strong bike rider, Stijn Vandenberg. They've been looking after him as we continue to see Basayev taking a slight advantage at the front end of the pack. He's about to get joined here by the Frenchman, Anthony Geslin.
Yeah, Geslin comes up very smoothly there. I would be a bit concerned. We've seen all of the favourites at some stage or other today at the back of the race, and you can see how much the peloton is blocking the road. This is a wide section of the course, but very shortly we're back onto the very narrow, dangerous roads, and if you're caught at the back of the peloton at that time, you can so easily be split off by a fall in the middle, and you're left literally walking up the climb and your race is over.
Well, this was probably the only climb, I would say, of the day, Phil, where you don't need to panic, but panic may well be the alarm bells ringing when you see the champion of Belgium coming to the front, the man who were on the opening stage of the Tour de France last year, and that, of course, Philippe Gilbert in the black, yellow and red jersey. He may well hail from the French-speaking part of this country. He does speak Flemish, speaks extremely good English, and he may well be trying the act here today to unify this country, which for many, many years has been separated into two by politics and of course by language.
Well, this year, or last year rather, he finished 9th in this event, the Tour de France, having just finished 3rd in Milan-San Remo, but then started a fantastic year for him. In all, he ended the year with 23 victories, and it was an incredible performance by the man from Belgium. BMC quickly signed him up and took him, and now he rides alongside Cadel Evans in the upcoming Tour de France. Remember that Cadel Evans, the BMC, is the defending champion in the Tour in July.
This is actually a dangerous little move, because sneaking into this move, once again, Thomas Voeckler there in the green jersey in second position. A real concerted effort was made there by the champion of Belgium, Philippe Gilbert, but also getting into this group because they've lost a man. In fact, Team Radio Shack have replaced a rider in the move here by Jaroslav Popovic. Now, this is the kind of race that would suit a man like Popovic.
And this is the point I was making, Paul, because Tom Bonin was caught at the back of this peloton doing his bit with the team car, and Gilbert has gone off the front and opened up a gap, and now it's a lot of work required for Bonin to get back into the action.
Yes, it is, but I think he's a man who knows exactly how he wants to ride his race. Look at the fact there's not one quick-step rider in this group at all. They're all in the group behind. They're looking after the interests of Tom Bonin. I know just a quick-step rider coming to the front end of the main field to lift up the pacemaking and slowly pull it back to this group.
Well, there's a face of Philippe Gilbert, the champion of Belgium, knowing that maybe his form isn't as good as it was at this stage last year, but this is Belgium, and this is their biggest day out as far as any sport is concerned in this country. This is their one day of action, and they don't like it if a Belgian cyclist doesn't win this event.
And we've just hit 30 kilometres to go now, and there's some anxious looks on the face, not least Philippe Gilbert, who had a magical season last year, not being repeated at the moment this time around. He's changed teams over to Team BMC, where he'll ride alongside Cadel Evans, but the legs aren't quite what they were at this stage of the season last year yet, but there's plenty of time. Voeckler here, sat at the back of the race just at the moment. Leader of the Europe car team. Been very, very active and ridden a good Tour of Flanders just now, Thomas Voeckler. I'm pretty sure that this Voeckler has never made a top 10 finish in this event in the past. He's looking good just now. Philippe Gilbert, second in line here, champion of Belgium. Continues now, a little bit of a problem there for the Europe car rider, two at the back. Not a good time to have a puncture. The roads are good at the moment, but the pressure is very definitely on now. Look at Philippe Gilbert here now, beginning to look like the man of last year as he looks around to see if anybody's going to drive on with him here. Can they split the field? They need to get something organised. And now we've got trouble here for the leader of the Rabobank team. This is Lars Boom, who slipped off the back. There's a great winter rider in cyclocross, and another counter-attack going off the front here as well. Another kilometre ticked off. The speed of the peloton now, as you can see over the ground from the helicopter, there must be up around 50 kilometres an hour right now as they continue with this pressure on. Tenacious bunch, aren't they? One or two people have opened the doors near the front, but basically that peloton is all together, and the race is virtually all together as well. Still, we've got more climbs to come in the Flanders Hills as they now begin to see it is all over here. Farah just looked over his shoulder. In the distance, he can see the peloton is closing in rapidly. There's no need for time checks now. They're still trying to desperately hold off the chase here as they dodge to the inside of the traffic signs, but I'm not too sure that they're going to hold off that peloton very much longer. Those motorbikes now really should be out of that gap. The riders now are coming together, everything to race for now, because all of the big favourites are here, with the sad exception of Fabian Cancellara, who by now I would think is already in hospital after that crash. So now we should see a different type of Tour of Flanders now.
David Bouchier here, the Frenchman, is still trying to stay away. He's been in the original break of 15 riders, but there is the coming together of the field.
Well, the field now realise that the Tour of Flanders is getting underway. They've got two more ascents of the famous climb of the Old Quaremont. Many years gone past, I always said the race doesn't start till it gets to the Old Quaremont. Well, this year, Phil, they've probably got 3 starts because they're going over the Old Quaremont 3 times in this event here this afternoon. 2 more times to go. A little bit of respite here for the main field as the 2 groups join together. A little bit of a lull in the action before they then start to line themselves up, because there's only 6 miles separate the top of the Kruisberg, of course, from the Old Quaremont.
And that's where we're bound for now. The road becomes extremely narrow. It's a cobble climb. It twists and turns. And the last time we went round it, before we came on air, a lot of the peloton were forced to walk the climb.
By the way, the street they're coming into now is known as the Ronde van Vlaanderenstraat, or the Tour of Flanders Street, named after this very famous road. It comes along this road in both ways here this afternoon. They're coming this way, they'll drop down into the small town of Kruisbergen along the bottom of this ridge, which this year the Tour of Flanders is zigzagging its way up and down this way and that to make this a very tough edition. I think probably one of the most nervous editions we've probably ever witnessed.
Johan van Summeren here to the right. He's now on his new team of Garmin Barracuda. He's taking on a late afternoon tea before the famous Quaremont comes his way. Incidentally, the Belgian riders have won this event 67 times out of a possible 95 rather. So they've dominated it in many, many ways. They don't like losing this race, and so be sure to see them under pressure as we get to the Quaremont this time around.
Well, Boucher, the rider in the front there from FDJ, the French team, is in fact from not too far away from here, because he was born in the small town of Fourmi, which is just over the border, not too far away from here. Another small group trying to prize an advantage over the front end of the peloton, but they're not being allowed any freedom at all, as Team Sky in the white jerseys with the blue strip right down the middle there pulls the race back together. They're obviously thinking about the possibility of a victory for one of their riders this afternoon, Edvald Bozenhagen or Juan Antonio Fletcher. But maybe the dark horse on their squad could be the man called Bernard Eisel, the Austrian rider.
Yes, Eisel is quite likely to spring a surprise. The Austrian is a very affable character, but this rider is trying to ride them all off. It's a hopeless task, I'm afraid. David Boucher, he's been in the breakaway of 15s almost since the flag was dropped, and he's the sole survivor now. The flag of Norway there waving for two riders, Boysenhagen and also for Thor Hushovd, both riders last year winning 2 stages each in the Tour de France. So Norway don't have many big cyclists, but these two are particularly good, and they're both in that field at the moment. Coming up on the outside, the Dutch riders for Rabobank also moving their men forward. Lars Boom's been very, very active on that squad. Meanwhile, back in the field here, this is Jasinski of Katusha. The field is regrouping. The battle is about to recommence.
Just look at the arrowhead now at the front of the peloton here. And it's big Matthew Heyman here, the tall man from Australia, rides for Team Sky. What a valued teammate he is now, trying to drag Juan Antonio Fletcher up in towards the action. That's Fletcher there on the left. Last year, Heyman did a great ride in Paris-Roubaix. He finished 10th there, and also 3rd in the early season classic here in Belgium, at Nieuwsblad. He loves this sort of racing, and he rides extremely well here. A lot of orange jerseys in here for Rabobank as well just now. They continue to try and make their way. Lars Boom, we've seen in a spot above, but he's back in the group just now. He is their team leader. Garmin Barracuda having to change tactics now. He's still tracking down David Boucher. Managed to switch in the peloton there. I was just wondering whether that was likely to result in a faller, but no. Just dodging the traffic furniture, I suspect. Spectators getting a little bit close here just now as the riders are trying to see the way around this sweeping right-hander. These are dangerous moments in the Tour of Flanders because the riders at the back want to be at the front, and look at that now, somebody going right round the out, and that's going to be a collision that you could see coming. That was very, very sad there. The spectator chose to run for it, and the other rider had nothing to do as he lies on the floor there. Well, that's always a danger, racing on the highways here in Belgium. The doctor's there on the spot, and the rider looks to me as though, oh, it's Sebastian Langeveld who's gone down there. The Dutchman. That's really, really quite sad. And it looks as though he is certainly out of the race. You can have another look at it here, I think. Spectator chose, he was in a compromised situation there. And in fact, his back leg took the front wheel away of Langeveld. So, another casualty of the race, and that wheel roaming, thank heavens it hit the tree, otherwise it might have gone into the centre of the peloton there. 13 seconds the gap now, and 41 kilometres still to go.
Well, we're looking down there very, very briefly on an accident which has just happened to Sebastian Langeveld of the Australian Green Edge team. He's collided with a spectator. The breakaway remains the same, although not for much longer. This is David Bouchier out in front, and the peloton now massing right behind him. Now, if we can have a flashback here to what happened on that crash, you can see they're speeding down the street here. A couple of riders going down the pavement, and they catch a spectator marooned in the middle. He tries to get out of it, and his front wheel goes into the front leg, rather, goes into the wheel of Sebastian Langeveld, and Langeveld's wheel is ripped out, and he takes a very, very heavy fall indeed. These accidents, Paul, they're so easy and so quick to mature, aren't they?
Well, all I can say as a piece of advice to any spectator is do not move, because 9 times out of 10 the bike rider will miss you. They're extremely good at bike handling, but if they've got a moving target in front of them, it's very difficult to decide what line they need to take. In the main field, though, Phil, they really are starting to whip up the pace. It is the final couple of kilometres as we get ourselves to the start of the Old Quaremont, and that's Frédéric Guédon sitting on the front end of the main field in that white jersey for FDJ. He's a very experienced rider. What he's trying to do, Phil, is get into the narrow streets to slow down the pacemaker at the front end of the peloton, hoping his teammate will get a couple more seconds advantage.
And Guédon, here in the Tour of Flanders, will retire from the sport next week in the Paris-Roubaix race, which we will also show you live. He's coming back from injury himself, but determined to retire in a race he once won, which will be next week in France. And there he is, looking over his shoulder here as Garmin Barracuda, the American boys, move up on the outside. That's their Australian team member, Heinrich Hausler, twitchy, looking around. Now we're getting down to the narrow roads. Remember, we are racing towards the second climb of the Old Quaremont climb. And that's the end of David Bouchier now. We're all together, 24.5 miles to go, and it's bye-bye from David Bouchier, who's been in the breakaway all day thus far, and he's caught 25 miles from the end.
Well, we talked, as I said earlier in the day, Phil, to Jonathan Vaughters. It seems as if his tactics are unfolding perfectly for the moment, because having had his man in the breakaway, Tyler Farrer, he was in the break of 15 men for a long time. His team didn't have to do any chasing. We now start the Old Quaremont for the second time. The third place rider in Team Garmin Barracuda there is Heinrich Hausler, and he's looking after the pre-race favourite from that American squad, and that, of course, is Sepp van Mark.
Picking up a nice tailwind on the cobbles of the Old Quaremont at the moment here. The spectator, there's no room on the road to stand at all, as you can see. And the riders haven't really got a smooth edge to these cobblestones. They've got to battle and bounce their way up to the summit. The art of riding these is fast as you can, and hope that you splinter the field.
Well, you might have said Tom Bonan was riding at the back end of the peloton, but when it's important, here he comes in third position there. He's moved himself up in that pale blue jersey. He knows where to be at the right time in a race like the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Right in front of him is a former winner of this race, Alessandro Ballan, also on the American squad at BMC Racing. He too knows the importance of riding at the right place at the right time in an event like the Tour of Flanders.
I'd be a little concerned about Ballan too. He's one of only 2 riders, the other being Fabien Cancellara, to have beaten the Belgians at their own game in this event in the last 10 years. And he's the, as Paul says, the former champion of Spain. He's second position at the moment. Bonan is in third position. Perfectly poised now. Boysenhagen is trying to move back up to the front as well. Now, if our camera holds this picture, you might see 1 or 2 riders at the back really in a spot of bother.
Well, it is a tough climb, this. It starts off with a smooth surface, then all of a sudden it kicks up. I just noticed George Hincapie going through there. I have to say, Tom Bonan in third position, Phil, is looking very comfortable. He really likes these cobble climbs. He knows how to ride them. You have to keep your hands nice and soft in the middle of the handlebars, allowing the bike to find its own way over at the smoothest possible route that you can attain.
Well, the organisers have finally got the crowd into order here on the Old Quaremont now, and they've given us what road they can to the riders. There is Hincapie in the race, looking for his 17th finish. Tom Bonan, his head twitching in that light blue jersey to see who is making the moves, and in fact it's Sylvain Chavanel who's made the move, and he's gone forward. Tomica is the man, but Chavanel is the distraction. They're on the same team.
Well, that's the French national champion there, Phil, in the red, white and blue, and they've got this cordoned off like an arena here this afternoon, and these are the gladiators of the Tour of Flanders this afternoon. I think the nod went down there from Tom Bonan to his teammate Sylvain Chavanel. Put the hammer down, my man, because we're now inside of 24 miles to go to the finish of this bike race, and there are still 4 nasty climbs to go. once they've summited here, the Old Quaremont for the penultimate time, Phil, they drop down and they go over the Paterberg. And that's the kind of climb that Tom Bonen really appreciates. Short, sharp and steep.
Last year it was Fabien Cancellara who caused all of the problems here. Sylvain Chavanel took advantage of that. He crossed the line in second place, while Tom Bonen had to be content with a fourth place finish and off the podium. Today it looks to me as though Chavanel is repaying Tom Bonen, and he's doing the brunt of the work at the front. Look at the damage to the peloton as we come up towards the top of the Quaremont. He has split the field here with this effort.
Well, this is actually the hardest part of the climb, because when you're on the steep climb, over on the left-hand side, there's a man we spoke about before the start of this race, Peter Sagan. He is a very good rider, just 22 years of age, but he's riding like the man with the experience of a 30-year-old.
And he's on very, very good form. We saw earlier he's had trouble today. He's been back to the team car. He had to change a bike. He waited 10 kilometres between analysing the problem and changing his bike. He wanted the right place to make a swift change. He did it. He got back into the action without using up too much energy.
Well, Chavanel's had a great season. He's been very omnipresent at the front end of the main field in races like Paris-Nice, but really by winning the individual time trial in the 3 days of La Panne just recently, only finishing on Thursday, and taking the overall victory, that's when it was announced that he would be a co-leader to the squad here of Quick Step team, where you can see Tom Bonen riding there in fourth position. I think today, last year, there was a little bit of misunderstanding between them, but now I think with the fact that Tom Bonen has come back to the form that he had 2 or 3 years ago, Phil, the team will be all for one on the running towards the finish. But look at the damage that Chavanel has done.
Well, I tell you, look at the first 4 riders, Paul. They could all be the podium by the end of the race. Chavanel, Sagan, Alessandro Balin, and then Tom Bonen. 2 winners now in the front group of 4 riders.
Well, a little bit of youth and excitement there. He missed that bottle that he wanted to take on board.
So Chavanel continues as he now heads towards the Paterberg, which is a couple of kilometres on, as Bonen still looks very cool there. Another danger zone. As we see, the breakaway has gone clear now on the second climb of the Old Quaremont, but the peloton, a bit smaller, but are still in the thick of it.
Well, looking at the riders in that move, it's difficult to know who will chase from the back here now. Sylvain Chavanel is a very strong rider, Tom Bonen and Peter Sagan there. Sagan, they say, is only a youngster, but he's saying he's going to ride his first Tour de France this year. Constantly spinning up at the front now. This could be the first selection, really, since we brought back the breakaway. There's the split over the field now. Everybody trying to set the trend at the front. With the Tour of Flanders, it can happen so quickly. For a minute you think you're riding terrific, you're in a great position, you look up, find you're not in the lead group, and it's curtains. It all happens so quickly in this race, but that breakaway up front there with the likes of Bonen, Alessandro Balin, who's always rides well in these European classics, right in the thicket. He was second in this race last year. That was Chavanel I was talking about then, he was second in the race last year, but Balin also constantly on the podium. These 3 riders just trying to get clear, and there's the peloton. I think they're going to be brought back now, because Bonen has got himself up to that front group along with Peter Sagan, and they're starting to infight, and these 3 will be the casualties of war, I think. There's the gap, and the peloton, funnily enough, is getting a little bit bigger again. We're running into the last 23-24 miles of the day now, just 35 kilometres still to run. This is an unusually large group here, and no particular favourite standing out just now. Down to 6 seconds. Maybe time to rethink the strategy here at the front, because that peloton with the sun on its left shoulder is looking rather strong. We're way out in the country now, but we'll be turning back towards Oudenaarde as we complete the last circuit around before the finish. Here we go now, up onto the climb again. Huge cheers for the 3 leaders here. And the pelotons, oh dear me, that looked like Johan van Summeren who hit the barriers on the right. and put a couple of other guys ricocheted into the ditch there. Total chaos on the bend. That might help the three leaders. But that is amazing. Johan van Summeren, the winner of Paris-Roubaix last year, couldn't get around that bottom bend and he clouted those barriers. Didn't seem to hurt himself though, I must say. But what it's done again is split up this peloton. Now you see the reason for riding as near the front as you possibly can, because these roads are so narrow, and the peloton now climbing back up towards these three leaders. Very shortly we're going to have a select group yet again at the front, but how decisive is it going to be at the moment?
Because you're watching the leaders here now on the climb of the Paterberg, but I can tell you it always happens when we go to commercial, I'm afraid, because we had a huge crash again as the peloton turned on, and it looks to me as though it is the fault of Johan van Summeren here, the boy in black, and this was a particularly ugly pile-up on a bend as they all go crashing down and blocking the road. Amongst other fallers there too were riders such as Luca Paolini went down, and I think Luca might be in this lead group at the moment. I may be wrong about that, Paul.
Well, it has caused a certain amount of chaos as we can now start to see the gaps opening seriously. 34 kilometres is all that's left here in this year's Tour of Flanders, and this is a very difficult climb as they go over the summit here of the Paterberg. A difficult climb, a steep climb. Just going round there, Dries Devenens, one of the teammates of the Omega Pharma Lotto duo, I'd have to say, because both Tom Boonen and Sylvain Chavanel have managed to get themselves back into the leading group of riders.
Well, there are three riders ahead of the peloton. They got away after we saw that wonderful effort by Sylvain Chavanel on the old Quaremont. And Juan Antonio Fletcher of Sky. Now look, we're going to see that crash again here as they swing onto the climb. It was Van Summeren onto the right. He slipped on the side. One rider there from Katusha, I think, went right into the ditch.
Caught out in that gap on the right-hand side was one of the pre-race favourites as well, Peter Sagan from Team Liquigas Cannondale. Tom Boonen, very attentive, Phil, has ridden across the gap here with a teammate, and we're now down to a very select group of riders, just 10 riders strong, with about a 5 to 7 second advantage over the front end of the pack.
Riders scrambling across all of the time here. The breakaway was spearheaded by Juan Antonio Fletcher. Himself has been off the back with bicycle problems today. His team got him back on. The sprinter Luca Paolini from Katusha, and Vincent Jérôme, who is one of the young French hopes. They talk about him with glowing pride for the way he will develop into being a good bike rider. This is Paolini on the right of our picture now. The breakaway is growing.
But Sepp van Mark is in here from Garmin Barracuda. Tom Boonen is in here as well. He's got a teammate alongside him in the form of the French national champion Sylvain Chavanel. This could well be the deciding moment, but Van Boonen certainly believes it is. Phil, he's very happy to come to the front and whip up the pacemaking.
Well, this has been such a hard-fought race, really. Breaks have been going all of the time, and the one that's going to work, surely, has got to carry a favourite along with him. As we swing around here, trying to get on terms here now at the moment. The rider from Sky, it looks like it might be Ian Stannard, is it? I think it could be Ian Stannard. If it's not Stannard, it's Boysenhagen himself. I can't quite see it. They're saying it's Boysenhagen. And the man we saw stop and was helped by his teammates, Oscar Gatto. He's a very fast sprinter if he can get across the gap to this lead group.
Well, these guys are organised. I have to say, you can see the French national champion now. This is a head-of-state breakaway coming off the front end of this pack, Phil. Second position, Alessandro Ballan, former winner, former champion of the world. But there are three riders in this leading group from Omega Pharma Quickstep, the new Blockhouse team on the block.
Yes, and as they continue to set the pace here, it's going to be tough now for anybody to bridge to this gap. We'll go out on our final circuit shortly. We have 3 more climbs to come. The next one in just a couple of kilometres, coming 32 kilometres as we are now, 20 miles to go.
The other rider in there, Phil, for Quickstep, in fact, is Nicky Terpstra.
So Oscar Gatto and Edouard Boysenhagen trying to cross the gap now at the moment. So the crunch moment has come in this year's Tour of Flanders.
Kop van de wedstrijd, that means the head of the race, and Sylvain Chavanel is the man now. He's teasing them all to come out and play. I get the feeling the champion of France is doing this in favour of Tom Boonen to try and take the pressure off the team leader. And he's doing a pretty good job, because that is a nice little group. There's Gilbert, Philippe Gilbert, in the champion of Belgium's colours. The tree's not yet showing leaves here. It's been so chilly and wet. And Alessandro Ballan, he's 32 years of age now, 12 victories to his name. He was 6th in Paris-Roubaix last year and 4th in Milan-San Remo. But he has been 4th in this. He won this event too back in 2007. He's a very useful man to have in the breakaway, but like all of the riders here, getting to know a new course in the Tour of Flanders. And I'll tell you, it hasn't gone down well with the people of Meerbeek Ninove, where the race used to finish. They've actually had a petition to try and bring the race back there, and are already really bitterly disappointed the race has selected this new route. Chavanel looking very relaxed at the front here. Got his team captain in there as well. Inside the last 20 miles of the race now, Boysenhagen here in the black, just sat at the back of the two riders. It's the face of Tom Bonen, just popped into the camera and popped out again. Bonen still looks pretty good. Tessato is here. Chavanel we've seen. Alessandro Ballan, there he is, the rather ungainly rider on BMC in the black and red colours, tucked in third wheel just now. This is a good breakaway. Peter Sagan is here, sat at the back in the Elite Gas Cannondale colours, combined with his national champions jersey as well. Now there's time to repair a bit of damage here as we go back here to this rather large peloton, who are still bringing up the chase and still willing to work as well. The combination perhaps is not quite right at the moment. 30 kilometres to go, time beginning to run out. We've seen some of the fancied riders play cards and all come to naught. This is looking like the strongest move we've had so far. Chavanel absolutely doing all of the work here, trying to give the biggest respite possible to Tom Bonen, who is the pride of Belgium as he goes for another win in the Tour of Flanders. Edward Boysenhagen just trying to bridge the gap up to the leaders here. And then the peloton, who by no means have given up the assault with the riders who've gone up the road and the big reputations with them, that's for sure. That bunch behind is still very manageable. Peter Sagan to the right. We are now on the Hogeberg, the third climb from the finish, and we're about 19 miles to go. Those two riders of Gatto and Boysenhagen have not crossed the gap. In the far distance, what is left of the peloton, but what we do have now are 11 riders, Paul, and in this breakaway, 3 of the 5 men we projected as favourites at the head of the programme are here. Sadly, Cancellara out with a crash, and Gilbert has missed the move.
Well, Gilbert may have missed the move, but he has a teammate in the breakaway. That's the rider just on the left-hand side. This is Boysenhagen. He's been pulled back into the main field. But all of the damage, I have to say, Phil, has been done by the team we've regarded this year as being a mega team. It was brought together by the formation of the Omega Pharma riders from the Lotto squad last year and the Quick Step riders, making this massive big team. They are strategically in the best position possible here this afternoon because they've got 3 riders in that leading group of 11. The 3 riders they've got is their pre-race favourite, Tom Bonen, the champion of France, Sylvain Chavanel, and the former champion of Holland, Nicky Terpstra. They're going to have to do something very special to beat these guys today.
And I must say, the team of Patrick Lefevre, this wily old Belgian, is vastly experienced. He's seen big teams come, big teams go. He's always steered a winning course with the team he's been in control of. And he has the firepower up here now with 3 riders on the Omega Quick Step team. If I have a little bit of a move here to try and get away, this will be Vincent Giraud, who is the young upstart on the French squads, and they're holding big court for him for the future.
Well, Europcar and French cycling is in a bit of a renaissance in the last 24 months. They rode exceptionally well in the Tour de France last year, probably the best tour that they have actually performed in the last 5 years for the French, and they've got a lot of young blood on the way up. Yes, Thomas Voeckler is the man who wears the flag. He's the darling of France, but now under his wing he's managed to bring to the top of the sport a lot of young riders who are now not scared of the reputations of the tough Flandrians, like this young man here, Vincent Giraud. you can just see that flag flying there is no longer the Lion of Flanders. In fact, that is the flag of the Wallonie, and that will be flying very high here this afternoon for Philippe Gilbert. He's not made the split here this afternoon, but his teammate Alessandro Ballan from the American team BMC Racing is comfortably in this group of 11. Number 121 there, Phil. I have to take my hat off to him. The rider from Liquigas was slowed down by that crash at the bottom of the Paterberg, but he was still in the leading group once they went over the top of the climb.
Well, he managed to get the split. It was a difficult split. He wasn't in the initial move. The initial move came from Fletcher, Paolini and Jerome himself, and the others scrambled across the gap after they came over the top of the last climb, the Paterberg. Now, Jerome is causing consternation here, but what he is doing, Paul, he's keeping the momentum of this breakaway to pull clear of the field. I can't see who is left to bring these riders back to the fold. It's
an ideal situation. A lot of big names there. They all feel they've got their chance in a group like this. They will be, though, Phil, a little concerned about the fact that Omega Pharma Quickstep are very strong with 3 riders out of 11. This is not a bad situation for the breakaway either, because it's almost like the carrot ahead of the donkey. They will keep themselves encouraged to work together to make sure this Frenchman doesn't steal an advantage of 10 seconds, build it up to 20 and then 30 seconds, and then put them into danger and being in a situation of not being able to pull him back before the finish.
Luca Paolini just gone off our picture to the left. He looks over, sees big Tom Bonen come through. The crowd here in Belgium will be cheering all the way while their hot favourite Tom Bonen is there. Well, if they have gone, they've gone, but that race down there tells me they haven't let them go yet. 17 seconds, a long, thin line of riders here, puffing and blowing at the front as they try to bring it all back together. This is Bernie Eisel on the front.
Bernie Eisel now will not be riding for himself. The fact that the rider Bosenhagen didn't get across the gap, Phil, I think is why all of a sudden we've seen the pressure coming to the front, because Bosenhagen is the big leader this year for Team Sky Pro Cycling. A little bit of a strange tactic, though, because Juan Antonio Fletcher is in the group, but maybe he sent the message back to his teammates behind. My legs are not that great here this afternoon. I was only in this breakaway to look after the man whose nickname is the Bodog from Norway.
Well, 4 years ago, Fletcher did finish on the podium in this event when we finished in Meyerbecker, and he was third then. And this is good to see a French rider on the attack. The French do not feature well in this event over the years, but right now Jerome is riding extremely strongly.
This is a little bit of a dangerous move, though, because although Nicky Terpstro's got an advantage, jumping straight across the gap is Sepp van Mark. Now, he is the man who, at the start of the day, was the Garmin Barracuda squad's tip for the top, and that's what Jonathan Waters told us this morning. They were all riding for this man. Tyler Farrar, the sprinter, had an opportunity to get into the early morning breakaway, but it was all about the man, the youngster, 23 years of age from Belgium, riding on an American squad, who was going to ride for himself this afternoon. Just scrambling across the gap, you've got Luca Paolini in the red jersey on the Russian Katusha squad, but everybody else now picking up the pacemaking.
I'd be worried about Nicky Terpstra. He's bang on top of his form. Not very far away from where we're commentating here in Oudenaarde is the town of De Panne, which is on the Belgian coast, and last week Terpstra finished 4th in their small stage race there. So he's got good form, he's had a win as well, probably having one of his best starts to a new season. But they're not having any of it here. Look at the work being done by Fletcher in the black as he drags the rest of the breakaway across. All of this in fighting is going to pull them out a bigger lead over the chase.
Well, there's a group at 16 seconds, and the main field are 44 seconds behind, but they're stretched out into a very long line. This race, Phil, this afternoon is far from over.
16 seconds is the gap now. That group number 2, I think, is still Gatto, but Gatto himself now has gone back into the field.
And probably a wise move, I would think, because the pressure going on here, as they really are working very hard but not cracking the field at all at the moment. Just tagged on to the back here is Luca Paolini in that red jersey, a very good sprinter if it comes down to it. Vincent Jerome of Europe Car still trying to hang on in here, but there's help on the way. Just approaching 15 miles to go now, 25 kilometers to the finish. The gap is still 16 seconds from the serious contenders for victory here in the Tour of Flanders, including the outstanding favourite now in the absence of Fabian Cancellara, Tom Bonen. And there he is, second wheel, Peter Sagan, who's shown us in the past. He's a very strong sprinter despite his young years. Could take on Paolini. Filippo Pozzato is the rider coming through now. He would like a result here as well. riders working well together at the moment. It's been a very aggressive race, but nobody, it seems, has got the strength to break it up on this course. Vincent Giraud still making the pace, being chased by another Frenchman here who rides for a Belgian team though, and that is Sylvain Chavanel. He's being tailed by Peter Sagan. Sagan looking particularly dangerous. The tall, slim, slender figure of Tom Bone in that light blue jersey of Omega Pharma Quickstep. And Luca Paolini butting in as well. All four riders building themselves terrific reputations now in the world of cycling. I'm afraid the reputation is too big for this man to survive for much longer. Still, survive he will, because he's out of sight at the moment. There's the chasers on the right, Pazzotto in that lime green colour. And still willing to do a lot of work here. 24 kilometres to go. We've just gone under the 25-kilometre banner. Here comes Filippo Pazzotto, Sagan, Chavanel, then Bonen. Bonen now always following Sylvain Chavanel. I don't quite know what was going on there, but I think Bonen is calling Sylvain Chavanel to come back to the front and keep the pace on. It looks like it worked. As they continue to work together here. There's Paolini sat at the back waiting to see how it goes. Team Sky, Matthew Heyman still very much a strong man in this race. He's having a great ride today. This is the crunch time for the moment in this year's Tour of Flanders, and they really are turning the screw now as tight as they possibly can to keep the rest of the field at bay. 37 seconds the spread.
So that's a great coverage of Paris-Roubaix. It's live, of course, and all of these riders coming together again to do battle. Not very far away from where we are today. This is the biggest race in Belgium. Paris-Roubaix is the biggest one-day race in France. They are scrambling here, Paul. They're racing to keep the pressure on. Do you think this is the winning move?
I'm pretty certain this is the winning move of riders, because you've got all the big names,
sure?
But as I say that right behind, they're boring down upon them. They've still got about a 40-second advantage, and I really can't understand why this race is not riding away. Nicky Terpstra, the former champion of Holland, he's putting the pedal to the metal here this afternoon, trying to drag this group clear, and they're hoping that they're going to survive to the next climb, which will be the climb of the Old Quaremont for the last time, but that's still 4 miles to go.
And as we look here at Team Sky, and they've done the damage to close this down, to bring Boysenhagen back into the action. News coming from the camp of Fabian Cancellara from Trek Bikes is that he has broken his collarbone, and that's the only update we have had since we saw that crash, which came in the feeding station with about 38 miles to race. Poor Fabian today out of the Tour of Flanders. Nicky Terpstra here, former champion of Holland though, trying to drive away to a lone win. Remember, we are now racing for the third and final climb of the Old Quaremont.
Well, Nicky Terpstra may well be the surprise move here by Team Omega Pharma Quickstep. He ridden very well in the early part of this season. As you've mentioned, Phil, he was 4th overall in the 3 days of Le Panne, but he was also the winner of the race across Flanders, the Dwars door Vlaanderen. But Team Sky have got themselves organised. They're in a pretty impressive situation too, because they've got Juan Antonio Fletcher in the breakaway. That was Bernie Eisel doing the big turn. He's now allowing Christian Knies to do the pacemaking on the front, and they have done a great job of pulling that gap back from 45 seconds to inside of the half-a-minute margin now. The pressure is on Team Sky to do something next time we come to the Quaremont.
It is all down to Sky to repair the damage. They didn't have the man they wanted in the breakaway. They had Juan Antonio Fletcher up there. He must have said, let's bring this back together again. It's still Vincent who's tried to get away here, Vincent Giraud, as he still joins up with Terpstra, but he keeps checking. He flick of his elbow there, that's to say come on through and set the pace, but I think Terpstra has about reached his limit.
Well, I'm sorry I predicted this to be the winning breakaway, because I was the bringer of doom on that breakaway here this afternoon, because the main field, led by the Team Sky charge here, is about to all come back together. Apart from the lone two who managed to get off the front of the main field, I don't expect that Tom Boonen and his riders from Omega Pharma Quickstep expected to see the main peloton again today.
Well, we are only 12 and a bit miles from the finish of the Tour of Flanders, and the whole peloton, that's left in this race, have rejoined at the front. But it is still Terpstra and Jérôme who are trying to stay away in the confusion.
Well, jumping across the gap there, you've got Team Sky making sure that that move doesn't go clear again. Sylvain Chavanel in third position in the French red, white and blue jersey. He is attentive. Juan Antonio Fletcher knows not to let anybody get away at a time like this, especially after the work that's been done by the teammates.
Well, there's the information as we start our third and final circuit here, as the riders now head out to the Old Quaremont for the last time. Luca Paolini at the front. The two riders are just about to be caught here. 20 kilometers or 12 miles to the finish, and I'm pretty sure the peloton is going to be all together any moment now.
Well, it has to be, doesn't it, really? 6 seconds is the gap. This really is a spectator-friendly race this year, as now they're starting to stir it up again at the front. They're sensing the coming togetherness of this breakaway. 12 miles or 20 kilometers to go. This is the big figure. He usually got his yellow shoes on, and Marcus Burkhardt looking over his shoulder now, trying to drag his team back into the action a little bit. Everybody begin to think they have a chance here now. Terpstra and Jérôme very shortly back into the fold now, just going around that corner. There they are. Peloton screaming now, because I think they're beginning to sense it's going to be showdown on the last climb of the day, and it may be a group sprint even. That's almost unthinkable in the Tour of Flanders. You can tell by the fact they're taking a little while to nail back Terpstra and Vincent, that they're all pretty much extended just now. And there's the yellow shoes of Marcus Burkhardt coming up to them. His strength will be appreciated at the front. Team BMC. They'll be looking to try and help Cadel Evans defend his Tour de France title in the month of July. And of course, World Cycling Productions will be producing a DVD for you of that as well. Strong, brave attacking by these two, and a good move perhaps by Burkhardt is taking the pressure off Alessandro Ballan and perhaps also Greg van Avermaet. But they're not going to escape the clutches of that breakaway, which is now coming up behind, which is partially the front end of the peloton. We can get a good look at it now. They're flying up to these leaders. I think warning signals went out when Burkhardt made his move there. That wasn't to be. Third time the crowd has seen them here, and they're seeing an ever-changing race on the Old Quaremont. Hit it hard and fast. At least at this section of the course they pick up a nice gentle tailwind, which isn't always a good thing because of the speed these riders will now climb. The big man in the centre of our picture is Alessandro Ballan, a former winner of the Tour of Flanders back in 2007. Tom Bonen trying to hang on to his back wheel there as he brings the peloton up. Pizzato still here, nipping round the back of Bonen is Peter Sagan. Sylvain Chavanel being forced a little bit down into the pack now as they bounce the way up to the top. And look at this move here now by Alessandro Ballan, showing his real strength. Tom Bonen a little bit concerned by this move by Ballan, the Italian on Team BMC. And that was why Burkhardt was making the move up to the front, to pave the way for Ballan to try and get clear. For the moment he's got the gap. Sagan can't master it. He's marking Bonen on the front. Pizzato is still there too.
And as the riders hit the Old Quaremont now for the last time, they caught those two leaders, and it is the former world champion Alessandro Ballan of the American BMC team who has gone clear alone.
Well, he's taken the initiative, Phil, of putting the hammer down, and he's now starting to get himself onto the hardest part of this climb. Well, I think it's the hardest part of this climb. It's the false flat after the steep start to the Old Quaremont. Look at the crowds on the left and right-hand side of the road. Tom Bonen is on the front end of the main field, but he's always covered by Pippo Pozzato in that lime green jersey on the left, or by Peter Sagan in the lime green jersey of Team Liquigas Cannondale. They're now starting to open up the gap, but we're now inside of 10 miles to go to the finish.
And again, the gaps are forming on the climb here, but this is the last time up this hill, but it's very swiftly followed in just 2 miles by the last climb of the race, the Paterberg, and then it's everybody for themselves, eyes down in the run into Oudenaarde and the finish. This is a perfect move by Alessandro Ballan today. They've had a lot of big riders on BMC and they've played all of their cards, and Ballan has watched and waited, and the result is now he's always planned to give it all his strength on the last climb of the Old Quaremont.
Well, he's a man who hasn't won a professional bike race, Phil, since 2009 when he won a small race in Belgium, as it happens, back in August. But he's now decided to put the bit between his teeth and put the pressure down. But he's being chased by another Italian. This is Pippo Pozzato, a former teammate of Tom Bonan. And look at the gap they are starting to open now on the false flat of the Older Quaremont, straight across that gap, as if it was absolutely nothing indeed. In fact, we're now looking at a 3-man breakaway as they get towards the top here. Tornado Tom Frietjes. Yes, I'm sure that tonight Tom Bonan will be having a big plate of Belgian fries if he can get himself the victory in a race like this. They're on the last few hectometers of the Old Quaremont, a bit of a flat road, then down into the descent, and it's over the Paterberg, Phil, which is the last climb of the day.
The active Olgers, the chasers, and they're being led here by Luca Paolini as he tries now to close down the gap. But they may have let the 3 strongest riders slip away here and come together on the very last climb of the Old Quaremont. I saw the face of Tom Bonan halfway up the climb. He was gritting his teeth and was not enjoying the climb at all. But he's found his strength somewhere to cross that gap to Ballan.
Well, that's what he was looking to do. He sat on the wheel. He's got the advantage tactically here because in this group behind, he's got 2 or 3 teammates, of course, still in there all of the time. Sylvain Chavanel, he will sit there. He'll be comfortable in his armchair ride with all of those other riders doing the pacemaking. If they catch this leading group, watch out for the counter-attack to come from Sylvain Chavanel, the French national champion.
This has been such a difficult race to lead. You've had to be strong throughout the day to marshal every move, because each breakaway that's gone has looked likely to succeed. Now, 3 top names have moved clear: Pozzato, Bonan and Ballan. Ballan and Bonan have won this race 3 times between them. And remember, if Tom Bonan does win today, then he joins the all-time greats, one of only 5 men who will have won this race on 3 occasions.
Luca Paolini is the Italian rider on the Russian Katusha squad. He knows this is crunch time in the Tour of Flanders here this afternoon. He can almost see those 3 riders in front of them. That's why he's trying to ride across the gap. While you can see there, Sylvain Chavanel makes sure that one rider doesn't get halfway across the gap. But it looks to me, Phyllis, that the firepower is disappearing from that group behind. The legs now are starting to cry out for a little bit of a surrender, a little bit of respite as the Tour of Flanders gets harder and harder.
Well, I've never seen Luca Paolini ride so well for years, but he's now looking as though he's being left to go on alone here as they continue to snatch bottles on the way. Ballan is charging. Now Pozzato, Filippo is in second wheel here. He broke his collarbone in the Tour of Qatar, which was in the month of February. He's built on that since he's finished 6th in Milan-San Remo. The other week he was 9th in the semi-Belgian Classic between Ghent and Wevelgem. And now he's got into what might be the winning move here. As we're seeing, Paolini has had to go it alone. 10 miles to go to the finish, and this little Italian sprinter needs to get to the front to use it.
Well, that's what he's thinking of doing. He wants to get himself across the gap. This is a hard thing to do, to get halfway across a gap, because he's using a lot of firepower, a lot of energy, Phil, trying to get across this gap. Then all of a sudden, he's going to take a turn onto the start of the Paterberg, and that really hurts. The difference in pedaling style between fast pedaling on these little downhill parts of the road, then the climb of the Paterberg, could be the undoing of Paolini, but he's halfway across the gap, and Pippo Pozzato is still prepared to help with the pacemaking.
We are not far from the actual climb of the Paterberg now, which is the springboard to the finish. As they continue, the last Italian rider to win this was indeed Alessandro Ballan back in 2007. Is he going to repeat it today?
Well, he's going to hope that he can. Pippo Pozzato's finished 5th place overall in this race before, and he's also a very astute tactician. But the impetus appears to have disappeared there. Halfway across the gap, it's still Paolini trying to make the junction. Bonan realizes, Phil, at a time like this, he's got to keep working. He's got to make sure that they conserve that advantage. when they go over the top of the final climb of the day, the Paterberg, there are just 7.5 miles of racing left to go to the finish. But it's not an easy 7.5 miles. And in fact, as many of the experts from Belgium said, it could be the wind at the end of the day that is the tactic that really is the undoing for many of these riders, because it could be a head crosswind on the run in towards the finish.
Onto the slopes of the Paterberg for the last time now. This is Ballan keeping up the tempo he found on the old Quaremont. Tom Bonan following pretty coolly in second wheel. Pozzato, he might be the weakest of these three riders. This is the last climb of this year's Tour of Flanders, the 16th of a real aggressive day of bike racing. Can Paolini cross that gap on the cobbles?
Well, we've got a Belgian here in an Italian sandwich this afternoon, because on the front is Alessandro Ballan. In third position, Pippo Pozzato. These are the riders now who are trying to steal the advantage. You can see just halfway across the gap is Paolini, but it's Peter Sagan who's doing the majority of the pacemaking in that group behind. Amazing to think, Phil, he's still in with a chance of a win at just 22 years of age.
Strong men will see this as their last chance now to cross from that chase to these three leaders. And these three leaders know that, believe me. And Bonan, like he was on the old Quaremont, is lacking a little bit here. He's finding the pressure just a bit too much as the race is being chased up by Pozzato at the front.
Well, he's under pressure, Bonan. He's controlling himself. He's trying to stay in contact. He's lost himself a bike length and a half, but he goes round the top here. He'll recover very quickly. He'll sprint, he'll accelerate, he'll dig deep into those reserves to make contact once again with those two Italians in front of him.
Well, a fifth-place finish back in 2009 is the best finish for Filippo Pozzato, and he looked to be the best man on that climb as they continue now to break up from the chase group. This is Sagan, his last moments to cross the gap and become a young winner of this event, and he will come from a country that has never won this race before.
Well, there's a lot of tension now in the run-in towards the finish because it undulates now. Tom Bonan will be happy to have survived the Paterberg, Phil, for the last time, but now what's he going to do? He's got to get his sprinting mind back in, but he's got to work with these two Italian riders with him, because the gap was only 18 seconds as they went over the top of the Paterberg. Looking back here, sweeping to try and get an estimation of what the time gap is. There you can see halfway across the gap. I would expect that would be Peter Sagan trying to come back into this race.
Well, this is Sagan trying to cross the gap now. Desperate moments through the narrow roads of the wooded countryside here in Flanders as they race now for the finish. This is Ballan, followed by Tom Bonan and Pozzato. And if it goes down to the line with these three, it's not a foregone conclusion for the sprinter Tom Bonan, because Pozzato packs a punch in the sprint, as does this man if he gets across. So as we race through these very, very narrow streets here now, can the champion of Slovakia put himself back on stage here and make it 4 men for the finish?
Well, just look at this now. It's everybody now for themselves. A little flick of the elbow there by Pozzato. That means he wants Ballan to come through and set up the pacemaking. This is the moment now, and that is Tony Galopin. He overshot a left-handed bend. I think he's got a flat front tyre, so he's lucky he didn't crash there. Well, that's very, very unlucky at that moment in time to get a flat front tyre, because the race under pressure now, and he'll have to wait for his team car because the splits are on. The team car will be trapped at the back. That's really unfortunate for Galopin, the Radio Shack Nissan Trek rider. This is how it happened, look. No control at all on that front wheel. Good bike handling that by Galopin, and really bad luck. Action on at the front now. They've got themselves 18 seconds lead. A good start. The favourites are clear, and they are all big favourites here now. Tom Bonan, all the shouts will be for Tornado Tom. I saw the placard earlier on the race through today saying Tornado Tom and chips, or French fries, whichever you like to call them. Well, right now he's sitting third wheel, and he's got two good Italians here with him. Pozzato and his new team here would desperately like a result today. 18 seconds the gap. 20.3% this climb. It really is a maximum gradient, yes, but that is about 1 in 5 in old measurements, and that is very, very steep. 18 seconds. Well, Ballan is doing all he can to help these riders. Peter Sagan was on the attack. We've not updated ourselves as to where he is, but But there's two more. This is Sagan here now. We swung back. He's about to be joined by what looks like a nice select group of riders from the head of the peloton, and then quite a large group of riders coming up, and Sylvain Chavanel is getting into this move again now. These are the final throws here, desperate moments as we run into the last 12 kilometers of the race. Alessandro Ballan, followed by Pozzato, followed by Tom Bonen. They've played their cards. Is it going to be good enough now to take the jackpot? Sagan still out on his own and looking as though he might well be closing in. They're placing Sagan, I presume, at 21 seconds here at the moment. Could be Luca Paolini trying to bridge across that gap too from that select group of chasers behind. Sagan relaxing in that position and just concentrating. Long straight road. You can see the whole race on this road, but can they get it all together? That's the question.
It's every man for himself now in the Tour of Flanders. We're getting down to the last 6 miles to go. This is Peter Sagan, but he's being swept up here by a group, and that there's still those three riders out in front.
Well, the three riders in front certainly have set the race on fire here this afternoon. Big names as well. Pippo Pozzato is the man with lots of firepower. Former winner of this race, Alessandro Ballan. Former two-time winner of this race, Tom Bonen. Halfway across the gap, Peter Sagan at 22 years of age was trying to close it all down, but the three leaders with just 6 miles to go hold on to an advantage of 25 seconds. No one is shirking any of the pacemaking in this leading group of three, and they have to work this downfield all the way down to the line if they want to survive.
There are no more hills. That is the gap, which is getting itself reorganized again. The cream certainly has risen to the top, but with 9 kilometers or 5 and a bit miles to go, there's time for it to go sour. This is Peter Sagan. He refuses to give up. Paolini's gone into the back of the chase group. He was up the road, he's come back. We've still got Jerome here. We've got also Sylvain Chavanel. We have a great ride being done by the New Zealand rider Hayden Rolston as well. There he is, just dropping down in the black top to his jersey. He's done well to read this breakaway.
Well, Quick Step and BMC Racing are in a very good position tactically, because that rider from BMC Racing, the American team, was Greg Van Avermaet himself, a very fast finisher. He will sit there and hope that they don't get caught and lead the chance for a victory to his own teammate, as we start to see now the acceleration. And this, in fact, is a Kiwi rider on Radio Shack Nissan Trek, Hayden Rolston, a former brilliant track rider.
Yes, a man who's had a heart problem, but the doctors first of all told him never to ride a bike again. He took a second opinion, then said go and ride your bike again, and this is the result. Hayden Rolston now spearheading here for Radio Shack. Remember that sadly today they've lost their outstanding favourite, Fabian Cancellara, out 38 miles to race, and his team tell us he has a suspected broken collarbone.
3 men now, Phil, still lead the race, and it's almost a half-a-minute advantage over Peter Sagan. It doesn't look as if these riders are really putting the hammer down, but the clock is what's telling us the truth. It's almost half a minute. That corresponds to around about 500 yards advantage over the chasers.
8 kilometers or 5 miles left to go. The chief referee on the left of our picture there, now in the prime position to see what is happening behind. If those riders come close, he will move those cars so they don't leapfrog across to the leaders. Tom Bonen, he's only here now, I think, Paul, because he's Belgian. He's too proud, but I think he's absolutely shattered. He has really been put under pressure by the attacks of these two Italians. First of all, by the attack of Alessandro Ballan, then by the acceleration of the man in the lime green jersey on the right-hand side there, Pippo Pozzato. And yes, not only is he Belgian, Phil, but he's Flemish, and that's what this bike race is all about. It's about the Flanders, the Vlaanderen, and that's why they've all turned out today. Almost 750,000 people have lined the streets of the Flanders here this afternoon with one hope, one desire in mind, to see a Belgian winner, and the name they all uttered this morning was Tommeke, and that's his nickname for Boonen. Well, the Belgians have won this race, as I said earlier, 67 times, and there was a period between 1924 and 1948. They were never beaten 25 straight years. The Italians, in contrast, have won this race only 10 times, and now the odds are 2-1 against Bonen. Well, that's theoretical, Phil, but I would say it's a 50-50 chance for Tom Bonen here this afternoon, because he is the man with the fastest finish. He's won on 7 occasions so far this year, and I'd have to say not only has his form
and strength come back, but his mental has come back, his mental approach.
Yeah.
And that could be sometimes the more powerful thing when it comes to the end of a bike race like this, especially when you've won it before in the past.
Well, we're seeing him today in Flanders live. Remember, we'll see him live again in Paris-Roubaix next week, and he's going to be in the mix again. That's also a race he has won in the past. But right now, Tom Bonen would give all his victories away to win this event for Belgium now. Massive crowds throughout. There's a huge crowd in the new finish in Oudenaarde, which is a long, straight finish. Peter Sagan here has tried his heart out today. Nobody has helped him, and it looks as though he's given up, and he's fallen back into the chase.
Hats off though, Phil, because he saw the move. He knew the move that he needed to be with. He could feel the power going out of this group that he was with and said, right, I've got to get across the gap. He took the one last chance that he could to try and get himself to this leading group of 3 riders. These are serious men. Pozzato in the lime green, in the black and red, Alessandro Balin riding like he hasn't ridden since 2009. And of course, I'd have to say probably a similar thing for Tom Bonen. He's been dogged by accidents and illness over the last couple of seasons, but this year he's back to being the man that he was a couple of seasons ago.
Now, 7 kilometers to go, just under 5 miles from the finish. The boys here are going to start thinking, how are they going to beat one another? That might cause them to slow a little bit. They can all sprint, and in theory now, for me, the best sprinter will be Pozzato.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one, Phil, just for a change, because in fact, for me, the best sprinter is Tom Bonen. He's a great sprinter. He's worn the green jersey in the Tour de France. He's won stages in the Grand Tours. He knows how to sprint, but it's always difficult. When you're in a 3-man group, it's not quite the same. There is always the chance that you make a mistake, you lead out a little bit too early. That gap is foreshortened by the camera there, because it's now, in fact, almost a 1-minute advantage. But these 3 leaders, they must continue to collaborate.
Well, Pozzato doing more than his fair share of work at the moment. 5th in this event in 2009, 6th the year before that. He's never been on the podium, though. And Balin and Bonen have both won this event. There is the official 5 kilometers to go, and we agree with that on our GPS right now. 56 seconds at 5 kilometers to go. In theory, that should be enough, but will it be?
Well, theoretically, they should survive. I think they will survive, because I think their guts have been taken out of the chase group behind. If we're talking about the success of professional bike riders here, well, Alessandro Balin, Phil, he's won 12 races throughout his career. Yes, some of them have been huge races. Pipo Pozzato in the lime green there, he's won 46 races. Tom Bonen, number 21, he's the most prolific winner in this leading group, with 116 victories to his career since he turned professional back in 2002.
And that's the man who's grimacing, just passing in and out to the right of our picture now, knowing he's got all the pressure of the day. But let's face it, all week he's had the pressure of the day, because the newspapers have been flashing headlines every day about Tommeke. Tommeke's the affectionate way of speaking in the Flemish language when you're talking about the boy. And Tommeke today is on everybody's lips. 5 kilometers to go for the chase, and all of a sudden the energy has gone from that group.
3 miles of racing is what remains here. Tommeke Bonen, he's got his teammate, team manager up alongside him, Wilfred Peters. Peters himself, a seasoned professional rider in the one-day classics, giving him some advice, some last-minute encouragement, just reminding him the pressure of the whole of this nation is on his shoulders here this afternoon. There's probably around about 70% of the television figures in Belgium this afternoon are watching these images of the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Makeshift grandstands. They've had a great day out watching the race. Now they're still cheering a Belgian hope here in Tom Bonen. He wears the flashes on the ends of his racing jersey sleeves there of a former world champion, which he is, of course, and so too is Alessandro Balin, who's setting the pace now. These are 3 of the biggest names in the world of cycling on the biggest one-day race in Belgium. I'm not surprised that Pozzato's team car here is getting pretty excited. It's a new team, really. He joined it this year, Farnese Vini. That means Farnese Wines, and he could be delivering them the biggest result of their lives today if he wins.
Well, just down there in the shadows of the Belfry, that's where the finishing line is. It's now just 2.5 miles away. The gap has stretched out. They won't get caught now this afternoon, because it's 1 minute and 5 seconds back to the peloton. But you've got to get the tactic right. Imagine riding, Phil, for 160 miles, making a tactical error on the running towards the finish and losing this race by mere centimetres. And that's what Johan Museeuw did a number of years ago when he was going for his 4th win. He was beaten by Gianni Bugno.
Yes, and how annoyed he would have been, the first man ever to win this race 4 times. We still have 3 riders sit on 3 victories. If Bonan wins, there'll be 5 riders on 3 victories. Sorry, 4 riders already there. Attack now by Ballan. He's probably the weakest of the 3 when it comes to the sprint. So he's turning the screw at 3 kilometres to go, but they're on him.
Well, that is a sign of not having too much confidence, knowing that if he's going to win, he has to win alone. Puts more pressure on Bonan to nail back the gap, but Bonan has got 2 Italians up against him, although he may well have the advantage that Pippo Pozzato in the lime green helmet there was previously a teammate of Tom Bonan for many, many years on the Mapei Quick-Step squad. But they will know each other, they'll know each other's mistakes, they'll know each other's weaknesses as Bonan looks at the face of the other riders now. You can see Pozzato there, that little swing of his hand there says, come on guys, we've still got to keep working. If we mess around too far from the finish, we'll find ourselves getting caught on the run in towards the line.
Pozzato now waving his arm. He doesn't want to be in the front, and I can't blame him at 2.5 kilometres out from the finishing line. That's about 1.25 miles to go. He's a 2-time winner of stages of the Tour de France. He won in Saint-Brieuc and in Autun. His last win coming in 07. He's won both of those stages with his sprint. And there's the attack, almost telepathy there, because Alessandro advertised it, and he's gone, heading for the 2 kilometre to go banner.
Well, as they say in professional cycling, Phil, that is telephoning in advance your attack there, because he attacked from the front, but no. Bonan was nervous, Bonan was ready. I think he's more concerned about the rider in 3rd position though, because Pippo Pozzato, he is a prolific winner, 46 wins to his credit throughout his career, but the man trying to take advantage of the marking of the 2 riders in 2nd, 3rd position is Ballan. But Ballan, I believe, Phil, has to get away alone if he wants to win. Pozzato is in the ideal position, but they can't mess about like this. They've got to make sure they keep riding up to the final kilometre and then settle it like men.
Well, Ballan has quite clearly told us he can't win the sprint, and he's trying desperately to get away. He's going to try and get away again before the finish. Maybe he'll be forced to go at 1,000 metres, just over half a mile from the line. He looks across at Tom Bonan. Bonan will wait for Pozzato to make the first move, I would think, and try and take him on the line. Now they're allowing Ballan into 3rd wheel, the place where you can't keep an eye on him. He's sure to try again.
But look at Bonan, his head is twisted half to the right-hand side. He's waiting to hear if there's the whistle of the acceleration coming. They're looking now at the banners across the road. Bonan is nervous as you can be, switching into the slipstream there of Pozzato, waiting to hear if there's any acceleration going to come at the last minute. If there is, he will accelerate with his gut. He won't wait to see Ballan coming by him. He will try and anticipate the move.
This is such a huge race. All 3 want the pretty, and there's the attack. It had to come, and Bonan was looking at Pozzato, little late on the kick, but he's gone 1,000 metres out from the line. He can't win from that distance, surely, and he's going to shut down again.
Much too far. This was his last chance, but you see how nervous Bonan is. Now he's got his hand. It's almost like a track sprinter. He keeps twisting his head round, trying to feel what's going to happen with Pozzato. Pozzato is going to wait till the last possible moment. 2 Italians versus 1 Belgian, 1 Flandrian, an echte Flandrian. That's what Tom Bonan wants to be this afternoon, a real Flemish bike rider. But he's nervous, he's twitchy, and when you're nervous, you can make mistakes.
Well, they've all been to this finishing line to recce it in the week, because they'd never seen this finish before. This is a brand new finish in this event. I think the event has been very exciting because of the new course. It's projected 3 great names as likely winners here. And now they're losing time all of the time. Ballan is exactly where he doesn't want to be at 500 metres, a non-sprinter on the front. I'm afraid cannot win this race. Pozzato knows now he's got to stay cool. He's got to get the drop on Tom Bonan, probably at 250 metres, and that's the result of cat and mouse as the peloton closes in rapidly. It's time to start biting your fingernails.
It is much too far for the main pack now. Ballan is in 1st position. He'll start to wind it up. That might be an advantage now for Tom Bonan, but locked onto Bonan's wheel is Pozzato. The sprint now is starting to wind up. Bonan in 2nd. Watch out for Pozzato.
So Ballan has started it, and Tom Bonan's seen the finish. He's being drawn like a magnet to the line. Doesn't look like he's got the legs in Pozzato, or has he? Pozzato is coming, but on the line, Tom Bonan gets it. He becomes the winner again. He joins the elite famous 5 club now as one of only 5 men to win the race 3 times in his career. And the peloton racing in here now. So it's Bonin, Pizzato and Alessandro Ballan as they race for 4th place. Now, we're not in control of the pictures, so our cameras are going elsewhere. And I'm not surprised Tom shakes his head. What a magical couple of weeks he has had in the Belgian Classics as we now commence the sprint for 4th.
Well, coming up to the line over on the right-hand side there, there is Luca Paolini, who was a great sprinter many years ago, and he's going to hang on here for 4th place. On the line there, it looks though as if it was Greg van Avermaet, Phil, winds it up as well for Team BMC, and I think he got 4th place just on the line there, ahead of Paolini.
That's a very good result for Greg van Avermaet, and a great day out too for the American team BMC, but they have to settle the 3rd and 4th, and not what they would have preferred, probably 1st and 4th. As Tom Bonin now being chased down the straight here. Bonin salutes his public. It has been an incredible race for him, and it just gets better and better. The resurgence of Tomica is what they will call it here. 2nd in Het Nieuwsblad at the start of the season, a local Belgian classic. Then he had a record 5th win in the Grand Prix E3, which is named after the local freeway here, which takes you across Europe. And then just the other day he won the other classic Gent-Wevelgem. And now, Paul, he sits here mobbed as a 3-time winner of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And there's Patrick Lefevere.
Patrick Lefevere has been a team manager, Phil, back since 1983. I have to say, he has managed to change with the times. We've got a brand new team here this afternoon.
So, well, it's all come good for Belgium. A new course, a controversial one, but it's come good with a Belgian winner. It is the 68th victory in 96 attempts by Belgian cyclists to win the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And now, Tom Bonin joins Arkiel Buis, Eric Le Mans, Fiorino Magni and Johan Museo as the only men to have won this event 3 times.
Well, it's all joy in the Belgian camp here this afternoon. And obviously Bonin, he must have been very nervous right down towards the end. It looked as if those legs were buckling underneath him, but that is his style. Pippo Pozzato came up alongside him, but in the end he didn't have that final kick to come over the top of the big Belgian.
Well, this is the traditional mobbing of the winner now. Remember, he's getting ready, made ready for the presentation. He'll also have to submit to the doping controls in the same region here. I think we can say that the new organised, well, not the new organisation, but the newly organised route for this race has been a success. 6 hours and 4 minutes was the race-winning time. The yellow flags here with the black line on are the regional flag of Flanders. It has been a very, very difficult race to actually read today, and the strongest men came out in the end. A huge result for Tom Bonin, and I make that his 117th win of a career which began in 2002. And more than that, Paul, it's his 8th win of this year, which is ahead of everybody else.
Well, Ballan is the man who starts to wind it up. And you can just see there, Bonin, as soon as he sees the gap open up, as soon as he knows he's got the ability to go right the way down towards the line, he goes full gas. He can feel, he can sense the acceleration coming up alongside him, but he knows as the line gets that little bit clearer, Pozzato's not going to come past him on this occasion. Half a bicycle length is enough to be the king of Flanders for another day.
Punches the air there. He had to concentrate because the photographers stand just about 50 yards after the finishing line to get the shots for the morning papers. He managed to sidestep those. This is a huge result for Tom Bonin. He's had a couple of years in the doldrums, it has to be said. I thought that the arrival of Mark Cavendish, who is consistently beating him in the sprints, Cavendish, by the way, choosing not to ride today, now he's come back big time, and he can't do a thing wrong. He's been winning since he won the first 7th stage of the Tour San Luis in Argentina back in January. He's never stopped winning since. They had to manoeuvre Alessandro Ballan into the lead. He's the non-sprinter. He had his goes on the course. He couldn't shake him, so they forced him to open up the sprint. And then Bonin could not wait to let Pozzato alongside him because he was quick today.
Well, he was, but Pozzato was in the ideal position. If he was going to win, this was the best setup he could have wished for this afternoon. But Bonin is a strong man when he gets that massive gear going. And all Pozzato could do would come up alongside him, almost a half a bicycle length behind, but no closer.
Filippo's sad, but he'll be delighted with 2nd place when he looks back on it tonight. I'm sure about that. It's his finest ever finish. It follows up his 5th and his 6th place finishes in the years gone by. Now there is a typical Belgian crowd enjoying the moment here. Their man has won, and as Belgium, as you probably know, is a great country for beer, there'll be a few gallons of it drunk tonight.
Let's have another look once more at the finishing sprint here. Paul Sherwin is trying to catch up with Tom Bonen right now. And, well, Pozzato will be very disappointed with this. He was about to crown the great result for his new team here, but big Tom Bonen drawn to that finishing line by a partisan crowd. I don't think on a finish like that anybody was going to get the better of Tornado Tom today. A big result for him and for Belgium. He really does seem this year he's come back to the form we used to know from Tom Bonen. Look at this youngster here. Tom Bonen's number in his hand. He's celebrating like he's just won the race himself. That's the enthusiasm in Belgium for you. Well, there's the new finish here in Oudenaarde, just outside the city. There's a great museum here, cycling museum, by the way. If you ever do come to Oudenaarde, you must go to the cycling museum. It's looked after by the great Belgian rider, Freddy Mertens. There's an unusual view for you. So I think we can now catch up with Tom Bonen.
And now Tom Bonen. Yeah, it's amazing. I wasn't expecting it. I was even not feeling super today. I don't know why, but I was feeling a little bit tired on the race. And but as the race went on, I kept the same feeling. I think the others went tired. But then in the final, I had to count on my sprint. I was not strong enough to ride it to the finish solo. But then with the three guys, this final, I think it was an amazing race with an amazing finish.
So edition number 96 of the Tour of Flanders is over. Here is the official result. Tom Bonen is the winner for a record equaling third time ahead of the Italian Pozzato and the other Italian Alessandro Bellan, who rides for the BMC American team. Greg van Avermaet crosses the line in fourth, just ahead of Peter Sagan. Where did he find the strength to sprint? Nicky Terpstra was in sixth place. Further down, all sprinters, Luca Paolini, and a great result by Tommy Vogler. And then came Matti Breschel and also Chavanel there completing the list. Well, I'll tell you what, the champion of France, he started the move from which his teammate Tom Bonen won today, and that's what team tactics are all about, Paul. He made the pain on the old Quadramont. He finishes in the top 10, and Tom Bonen is the man. So just look at the scenes here now, because this is what it's all about. The sprint finish by Tom Bonen, and then the fans, and just what a great man he is, delivering the goods for them. So happy days for the former Belgian champion. There he is, the big gritting of the teeth there, Paul. Just a little smile coming on Pozzato's face. He thinks, I can't do it.
A wry smile. He knew he couldn't beat the big man who is firing back again on all 8 cylinders here this afternoon, Tom Bonen. He's got the form back. He's going to be a difficult man to beat next week, of course, in the Paris-Roubaix Classic.
So the cycling season now really is underway, with the first Belgian Classic bringing Tom Bonen a victory. And don't forget to stay with us throughout the cycling year here at World Cycling, where we'll bring you DVDs on all of the major races, and of course that will include the Tour de France and the Queen of the Classics, Paris-Roubaix. To find out more, you just go to worldcycling.com. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this one. It was a great result for Tom Bonen, now a 3-time winner of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. For Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying until the next time, goodbye.